Chapter 1105. On the 5th of January in Stormwind City, Countess Enristo's mansion, Princess Onyxia threw the thick stack of intelligence reports onto the ground. It seems like we've been underestimated. I was expecting something from this Duke Marcus who murdered our father. Unfortunately, pretending to have a military parade and then besieging the Blackrock Tower? What a boring move. The one who spoke was a black-haired human man with a flaming crown on his head leaning against the wall. Unfortunately, his appearance was similar to that of the Lord of Presto back then. Anyone who had seen the human form of Nesario would quickly associate him with the Black Dragon clan. He was naturally Nesario's eldest son, Nefarian. Onyxia elegantly took a sip of the red wine in the glass. A drop of bright red wine flowed down the corner of her lips, making the black-haired dragon beauty look extremely flirtatious. My brother, are you planning to let those filthy orcs attack Stormwind City or the Iron Furnace Castle in advance? Or is your trump card Ragnaros, who is under your nest? The Blackrock orcs are just a bunch of slaves and watchdogs. As for the King of Flames, I hate communicating with such violent fellows because they can't be talked to properly. Nefarian shrugged helplessly. Oh, in the end you still choose to trust your toys? Onyxia did not hide the sarcasm on her face. Those precious experimental subjects will be the greatest support for me to rule over this land in the future. Onyxia interrupted Nefarian before he could finish his sentence. What a joke. Your inferior toys might not even be enough to deal with the weak humans, and you still want to deal with the dragon army of the Dragon Slumber Shrine? Nefarian's face turned green. Stupid sister. You don't understand the greatness of science. Instead, you've been staying in the human territory. Aren't you afraid of being discovered and surrounded? Ha. Onyxia laughed again with an enchanting and evil tone. The 4 Dragon Kings are not here who can stop me. Not to mention if they really angered me, I would burn down Stormwind City and kill their King William and Prince Anduin. Then I would find a chance to kill that Duke Marcus. When that time comes, let Stormwind fall into disunity and chaos. Humph. Arrogance and confidence were 2 different things. Since mortals could kill Archimonde, then our demigod bodies might not be that reliable. Be careful, my sister. I don't want to see your head hanging in Stormwind City's King's Valley next time. You're the one. Just don't let the Fire Demon King burn you. The 2 siblings parted on bad terms. That's right. Although the Black Dragons were individually very strong, their selfish characteristics made it very rare for them to be wholeheartedly devoted to the outside world. Even though they were siblings, they each had their own standpoints. The Black Dragon siblings did not know that thousands of meters away, the youngest of the Windrunner sisters, Lilith, had activated dragon tracking and easily sensed Nefarian's arrival and departure. As expected, Lilith sighed softly and then disappeared into the night. On the 6th of January, in the Feralas region in the southwest of the Kalimdor continent, a bloody and exciting gladiatorial tournament was about to be held in the arena of the Hammer of Misfortune. Unlike the original history, the gladiatorial tournament had disappeared from the Eastern Kingdom because of the destruction of the Lordaeron Kingdom. But now, because of Queen Kalia's benevolence, she hated this kind of cruel and bloody killing, and cancelled the gladiatorial tournament in the Eastern Kingdom. Where there was demand, there would be a market. Perhaps it was because after the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the orcs had been slaves for more than 10 years that the gladiatorial tournament became popular among the orcs. Slaves from all over the world were sent to the Hammer of Misfortune in Feralas. They were forced to duel with each other or fight against all kinds of dangerous creatures. Of course, there were also orcs who boasted of their bravery who volunteered to participate in the gladiatorial tournament. This was the only chance for them to legally kill humans in an environment where their chief, Sal, strictly forbade harming people from the Alliance. Similarly, investors from all over the world who pursued excitement traveled thousands of miles, and even crossed the ocean to come here, just to watch the most exciting gladiatorial tournament. On this day, at the highest level of the Hammer of Misfortune's arena, there was a new pair of guests in the VIP suite named Dawn. One had to know that this was not an ordinary VIP suite. Just the cost of the suite for a day was as high as 10,000 Arathor gold coins. When the mysterious owner of the Hammer of Misfortune first set up this suite, he did not expect anyone to be so rich that they could afford the astronomical amount of 10,000 Arathor gold coins a day. This was more like a sky-high price, all for the sake of promoting the second-class, Radiant Moon suite. Who would have thought that today a mysterious investor would appear? Cash payment, no credit allowed. Originally, when the goblin in charge of receiving the guests heard the request, he was already prepared to mock this mysterious tycoon who overestimated himself. He even called for the two-headed ogre behind him, who only had one head left, to come forward. This was because he had never thought that someone would pay for this. From behind the investor, an attendant walked up and opened the space bag without saying a word. Crash. With a crisp sound, a sea of gold coins that could not even be loaded into a carriage poured out in front of the goblin in charge of receiving the guests. The attendant only said one sentence. My master said that if there's more, consider it a tip. After saying that, the mysterious sugar daddy, who was the leader, grabbed the blonde masked dancer and walked past the goblin receptionist in a dignified manner. It had to be said that the Dawn VIP suite had some quality. The windows of the suite were made with the latest one-way glass technology from the Iron Stove Fort. When outsiders looked in, it was a field of reflection. In the middle of the suite was a red velvet chair that looked like a large bed. It was very warm and comfortable to sit on. There were 2 stoves on the left and right sides of the room. Outside the room, there were 2 dedicated human attendants adding firewood to the stoves. There were a few ropes hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room, each corresponding to a service. With a pull, a specific bell would ring, and dedicated attendants would immediately come in to serve the guests. The suite was divided into 2 entrances. The one near the arena was naturally for the distinguished guests. Outside was the lounge for the guards and maids that the guests had brought. Just as he entered the suite and lay down on the chair, the mysterious investor cast a spell to isolate himself from the outside world, and then revealed his true appearance. Yes, he was Duque. Yo, Jaina, since the main character hasn't appeared yet, do you want to practice alchemy with your master? Chapter 1106. Jaina had already become good friends with Wuxia, so of course Jaina knew what human alchemy was and what ORZ posture was. They were all the same thing. Duque, you bastard. You told me that you have official business that concerns the future of the Alliance. That's why I put down Theramore and came with you, but you tell me this the moment you arrive. Jaina seemed to be angry as she removed her veil. That's right. Isn't it related to the future of the Alliance that we're here to see how William is doing? Aren't you very close to him? We came early and he hasn't gone on stage yet. We're afraid that we'll miss the show if we're too late. Am I to blame? Duque spread his palms and changed the topic. Speaking of which, alchemy? Jaina's expression changed instantly. She was born a princess and had received the strictest etiquette education since she was young. Normally she wouldn't be willing to do that. But Jaina suddenly realized that she and Duque had been apart more often than not over the past few years. Duque had either been blasted into the void or met with an accident and was stuck in the river of time. The first time was 10 years and the second time was 4 years. A great hero with an indomitable spirit naturally had to shoulder the fate of the entire human race and even the entire world. She naturally couldn't be such a petty woman and ask Duque not to save the world and not to do those dangerous things. It was obvious that a new crisis was approaching, and no one knew if they would be able to get through it this time. Especially when they would have to enter the molten core that was like a fiery hell. She didn't even dare to imagine the horrifying scene of Duque or one of her familiar comrades being burnt to a crisp by the flames. Bastard master, how much do you want me to do? Jaina murmured to express her anger, but in the end she put aside her reservations and said, I'm doing this on account of the fact that I haven't had many days alone with you over the past few years. Duque also knew that he had let down any of the women in the harem. He shouldn't have been such a bastard. However, even if he did not go out of his way to pursue them as they got to know each other better, Jaina, Kalia, Wuxia, and Tyrant, who were originally famous beauties in history, started to pursue him, or perhaps because of a freak combination of factors, he unknowingly fell deeper into love with them. By the time he came back to his senses, there were already 7 women in the harem. In the face of Jaina's anger and complaints, Duque could only shamelessly go up to her and kiss her. I know the war is coming. I'm just looking for an excuse to be alone with you. At least you have me in your heart. The evil Mr. Du became even more aggressive. Since you are pretending to be a dancer today, why don't you dance first? Jaina felt like strangling Duque to death. You're not jumping. In the face of Duque's questions, Jaina felt her body heat up. Damn it. I really don't know what I owed you in my previous life to be bullied by you like this in this life. Jaina grumbled. She was afraid that it would not be safe, so she quickly closed the curtains. Then, she gently raised her hands at a beautiful angle, and her slender and fair feet began to dance. That sexy waist that drove countless men crazy began to twist like a water snake. Mr. Du's mouth began to dry up. Half an hour later, the voice of the MC sounded. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will welcome an earth-shattering battle that can be called the Battle of the Century. The two sides are the challengers, the Night Elf Druid Brawl Bearmantle, the High Elf Thief Valilla Sagunner, and the dual sword-wielding warrior, unnamed. Their opponent is the defending champion of the Hammer of Misfortune. Over here, Duque, are you not done yet? The battle is about to start. Alchemy is just a little bit away, wait. I'll be done soon. Duque's godly sword flashed, and the light of his sword flashed as he attacked Jaina. Boo-hoo! A few minutes later, Jaina, who had finally completed the alchemy ritual, quickly tidied up her clothes. However, she realized that she did not even have the strength to stand up. She could only lean against Duque on the recliner and look into the arena. One had to admit that the design of this super VIP room was really great. In the VIP room on the 5th floor, one could see everything in the arena from the recliner and look down through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Coupled with the room's field of vision magnification, one's field of vision could be magnified by up to 10 times as long as one pointed at a certain place. Enjoying the embrace of her lover from behind, Jaina suddenly felt a warm sense of happiness and security. Looking at the 6 people in the arena, Jaina could not help but look at the black-haired young warrior with a scar on his face. Jaina and William had known each other for a long time. It was the first year of the Dark Portal, and Stormwind City had just fallen. Due to their age, William, who was a few years younger than her, preferred to follow Arthas, who was like an adult, and was only acquainted with her. At that time, although William pretended to be strong, there was still a hint of weakness and fear in his bones. Now this impression was completely subverted. It was still the same familiar facial contour, but the delicate face that used to be like a little fresh meat had become more defined and defined during these days of life and death. The scar on his face, which was said to have been caused by lightning in the arena, added to his manly charm. There was also his beastly wolf-like eyes. Just looking into them would make one feel as if they would be torn into pieces in the next moment. I seem to understand why you didn't rescue William directly, and instead wanted him to continue his training. I know. I'm a considerate elder. Duque played with Jaina's Mount Hygel fondly. Hey master, aren't you afraid that William will really slip up and get killed? Duque stopped and hugged Jaina's waist instead. I'm afraid. But I'm more afraid that William will grow into a useless person. In this increasingly chaotic era, every kingdom needed a wise leader. A useless king would only lead a kingdom to destruction. Moreover, I've seen fragments of William's future in the River of Time. Is fate unchangeable? Jaina's voice was almost a whisper. No. Fate has changed a lot and it will change any time in the future. But I have to take the gamble. Only then will I be worthy of His Majesty Langrin's nurturing and trust. Just like how I treated you in the beginning, I know that His Majesty Daelin only wants you to be a good duchess or queen, but I feel that it would be a great waste of your talent and ability. So I didn't treat you like a canary in a cage and instead sent you out to Theramore. Look, aren't you living a very fulfilling life now? Thank you, Duque, I love you. Jaina stretched her neck and turned her head to give Duque a passionate kiss. Chapter 1107. In the arena, the battle had begun. To the public, William, who was a nameless person, was the first to launch a charge at the defending champion. William's charge was very unique. Normally, a warrior's charge would lock onto a target, and then use the warrior's unique fury ability to charge towards that target. However, halfway through his charge, William used his extraordinary senses to detect the orc sword sage who was in a state of stealth. He immediately switched to intercept, and charged towards him. Bam! It was a clash of flesh against flesh and strength against strength. It was a clash without any fancy moves. William, who was waving his swords, not only knocked the orc sword sage out of stealth, but he also used hamstring break in one go. Well done. During the days that William had been a slave gladiator, his fellow gladiator partner, the high elf bandit Valilla Sagunner, suddenly jumped out of stealth. She raised her hands, and the 2 daggers in her hands that emitted a scarlet aura were already waving at the back of the orc shaman who was the healer at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. Sneak attack. Backstab. Cleave. 5-star eviscerate. If one were to look at the sequence of attacks, Valilla was undoubtedly the worst bandit. That was because she only cared about dealing damage and had forgotten to control the enemy's healer. If one were to consider her shocking attack frequency of 5 skills in a second, as well as her extremely efficient use of energy, that was impossible for ordinary bandits, it was not difficult to understand her choice. While William was still fighting with the sword sage, while their druid bearskin was still transforming into a bear and fighting with the opponent's warrior, the defending champion's healer, the shaman, was already dead on the ground in just 3 seconds. Baylor. Healer. I need. The orc sword sage was suffering from William's suppression. He had seen powerful warriors as well as warriors who were fast and agile, but he had never seen a powerhouse like William, who had such a perfect combination of strength, speed, and agility. William brandished his swords and created a sword net that resembled a torrential storm. He had the insane speed of a violent warrior and the dexterity of a weapon warrior. What was more frightening was that the sword sage realized that William's parrying skills were equally proficient in the few times he counterattacked. The sword sage was on the verge of breaking down. He realized that he was dealing with a super monster that was proficient in all three elements: berserk, weapon, and defense. However, this monster had a stronger fighting spirit than the orcs. Unsurprisingly, the Beastman Sword Saint only lived 2 seconds longer than his shaman companion before following in his companion's footsteps. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Valera firmly believed that William would be able to kill the sword sage. Hence, after dealing with the shaman, she dashed towards the remaining orc warrior. Unexpectedly, Brol Baremantle, a druid who specialized in the wild, was suppressed by the orc warrior. The orc's blood-red battle axe had some kind of evil special effect that absorbed the enemy's life force. The sharp axe would always be able to break through the tough skin of the druid who had turned into a bear, and cause considerable damage to Brol. The orc warrior realized that he couldn't catch up to William and Valera, so he killed Brol with a series of moves. After Valera became invisible, she activated Sprint, and dashed over using Sneak Attack on the orc warrior. However, the effect wasn't very good. The opponent was immune to a large number of control skills in his berserk state. What was worse was that the opponent switched positions in the next instant, and continued to chase after Brol while activating Counter Storm. This made Valera feel like a mouse trying to pull a tortoise. I'll do it. At this moment, William descended from the sky like a god. He used a gorgeous leap slash to teach the orc warrior a lesson. The orc warrior, who couldn't take the opportunity to kill Brol in an instant, was forced to a dead end in a 3-on-1 situation. As expected, when Valera used the 5-star kidney strike and stabbed the orc warrior in the back, the orc warrior's body was instantly destroyed. That was a kidney. A man's most important internal organ. Just like that, the orc warrior was torn into pieces by the bloody and brutal Valera. Of course, there was no need to mourn for this. Just as the orc warrior was paralyzed on the spot from the pain and paralysis, William's 2 long swords formed a cross and pierced the arteries and veins in the orc's neck. In the next second, he waved his 2 swords and a green head the size of a basket flew into the sky. The battle was over. The MC's roar reverberated through the entire arena through a sound amplification spell. A new champion has been born. Let us congratulate them. Now, this black-haired young man has led his team to become the champion of the Hammer of Doom Arena. He has obtained the great title of Ghost Wolf. That's right. This nameless human powerhouse, from this moment onwards, his name is the Great Logosh. 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 The audience went crazy, especially those who had bet on William's team who had won. They held onto the tickets in their hands tightly, waved their fists and screamed. In the VIP room, Jaina looked surprised. The title of Ghost Wolf. This time, William is going to be famous all over the world. Duque hugged Jaina and smiled. In the past, the current chief of the tribe, Thrall, was also a famous champion gladiator in Lordaeron. Now, William has also obtained the title of champion gladiator. Don't you think it's very funny? Hey, Duque, why do you have to groom William? It's actually quite good for you to be the leader of the alliance. Jaina asked a question that had been hidden in her heart for a long time. Duque shook his head. I groom William just like how Lothar groomed me. There is no conflict between us. I have wisdom, foresight, and powerful magic power. However, I still lack faith, a strong spirit, and willpower. This is what I've been through. Furthermore, I don't know when I'll be forced to leave again. Don't you think that the alliance needs double insurance? Jaina stopped talking and gently rubbed her smooth face against Duque's. Duque sighed in his heart. This couldn't be helped. This was inseparable from his experience of learning about animals before he was 20 years old. A good young man who had accepted materialism really couldn't accept idealism. He would never be able to have such a pure spirit of chivalry like the natives of Azeroth, nor would he run to believe in gods. The alliance needed at least 2 flags. One was practical and the other was spiritual. Duque at least hoped that William would become a benchmark for the spirit of chivalry after he grew up. Chapter 1108. We've won. Ah. Vala put her arm around William's shoulder without hesitation. happily drinking the wine that they normally wouldn't see. That was a fine high elves wine from the Quell, the Lost Era. Now that Sindorii was being rebuilt, the supply of all luxury goods was suspended, so this fine wine called Sadira could be said to be a rare treasure. We're the champions. Brawl was also very excited. He raised a large cup of nectar. Ever since he had been imprisoned as a gladiator slave, he had not tasted anything that fit the teachings of the Druids for a long time. Every day it was either hard black bread that could knock one's teeth off, or barbecued meat that tasted barbaric. Yes, it was leftovers from the previous night. Now that they were the champions, their damned master, Riga, was finally treating them better. Yo John Doe. Oh no, we should call you Rogosh now. My dear Rogosh, why are you still so sad? Is it because we haven't regained our freedom? Vala comforted William. It's okay. Riga may be a bastard, but at least he supports us in making money. If we can defend our title in the next tournament, we'll have enough money to redeem ourselves. Yes, that's right. Brawl also comforted William. He even tugged on the kryptonite collar around his neck that symbolized his status as a slave. Their current master, Riga Earth Fury, was born in Draenor. When he was young, his clan was wiped out by the ogres during the war. Riga was captured and trained as a warrior. As a powerful warrior, Riga and the Orc army passed through the Black Gate and participated in the invasion of Azeroth. He was eventually captured. After escaping from the captive camp, he became a gladiator, and after earning money to redeem himself, he became a slave owner. He used his savings to purchase an Orc warrior from the Blackrock clan, Blood-Eye Redfist, a Night Elf druid, Brawl Baremantle, and theoretically a Blood Elf thief, Valilla Sanguiner. They were active in famous arenas such as the Hammer of Misfortune and the Ring of Blood. After Blood-Eye died in battle, he began to look for a new gladiator. Thus he picked up William, who was unconscious on the beach of Duroder. Faced with his companion's consolation, William smiled bitterly. No, I'm not in the least worried about freedom. I'm just still confused. Even though I won the gladiatorial championship, I still can't remember who I am. Memory loss was a rather unsolvable problem, and Valera and Brawl did not have a good solution either. They could only console William. You will have the chance to get your memories back in the future. At the same time, Riga Earth Fury was reveling in his private room. Ah, money. So much money. I knew that they would become my cash cow. Ah. Liga laughed wildly, dumping dozens of chests of gold coins on the floor of the room, rolling on the ground a few times before excitedly rushing to the bed and hugging a very beautiful orc girl in his eyes. The orc girl's clothes were half exposed and her eyes were already flirtatious. Just as he was about to celebrate with the orc girl, a terrible sound of destruction came from the wall behind him. Hua! It wasn't a loud sound, but the wall behind him was suddenly blasted open by the flames, and a 4-meter-tall, 3-meter-wide door appeared. It wasn't an explosion, but an ultra-high-temperature flame that instantly burned the wall made of hard granite into ashes. Only dust and some glass-like melts were left on the ground. A beautiful black-haired female thief and an equally beautiful radiant moon elven wizard entered. They were obviously very powerful, but they wore maid uniforms and walked through the door first. When the female elven wizard walked past, a visible frost aura spread rapidly on the ground, extinguishing the heat wave brought about by the flames in an instant. Then she used the frost elements to condense a dazzling white carpet on the ground. They were carrying magic lanterns that were gold and red that were not sold on the market, and were obviously from the royal family of Kuel Salis. They stood on the left and right sides of the room. Then a young human man in a blue and white mage robe walked into the room with a blonde human mage wearing a crown and the same blue and white robe. Hello. I'm Duque. I'm Duke Marcus. Next to me is Queen Jaina Proudmoore. Actually, Liga could recognize Duque even if he didn't introduce himself. As an old warrior who had experienced the first and second battles at the Dark Portal and fought against Duque many times, Liga would recognize Duque's demon-like face that had sent millions of orcs to hell. Pushing away the orc woman in his arms who was so frightened that she couldn't speak, Liga rolled off the bed pathetically and knelt on the spot. He was no longer the brave and fearless warrior of the past. His previous life as a captive and a gladiator had taught him what respect and obedience was. Duke Marcus was recognized by both the Alliance and the Horde as the strongest person in the Alliance. He was the commander of the Alliance, the Storm Duke, and a man with power that could overturn the world. Why would such a man come here to find a small slave master like him? At this thought, Liga suddenly remembered the amnesiac young warrior who had just made a lot of money for him. Do you know who you've imprisoned and used as a slave gladiator? I don't know. Liga knelt on the ground, shaking his head non-stop. He had guessed a little, but he definitely couldn't admit it because once he did, he would definitely die. Garrosh is the king of the Stormwind Kingdom, Varian Rin, whom I serve. As the angry voice fell, Liga was sent flying by a powerful arcane impact, and he was imprinted on the wall. The surging bluish-purple magic was like a solid substance, suppressing him as if it wanted to press his whole body into the granite wall. No, spare me. Spare to me. Liga was in a difficult situation. He never would have thought that his money tree was a big pit. He had actually picked up a king to be his slave. It was fine if he was a slave. If he hadn't been discovered and was secretly sent back, it would have been a great achievement. Now everything was over. The strongest mortal in the world, Duke Marcus, had come to find him. Liga was so scared that he almost **t himself. Just when he thought he was going to die for sure, the magic that was pouring into his body suddenly disappeared. Duke's voice rang in his ears again. You should go to hell without a doubt. But seeing that you've made Varian grow to my surprise, I'll give you one last chance. I need you to put on a show for me. Chapter 1109. As the owner of the arena, he naturally hoped that the gladiatorial matches would not stop throughout the year, but it was obvious that this was impossible. Rich people could not possibly stay here 365 days a year. Similarly, gladiators would also have injuries and need to rest. Magic could temporarily heal wounds, but it was impossible to replenish lost blood or repair deeper injuries. Most wounds could only be healed with time. Staying in a place like Farilas that was filled with blood and violence would only prevent the gladiators from getting enough rest. Hence, according to the rules of the Hammer of Misfortune, the remaining gladiators would be sent somewhere to recuperate after the final gladiator champions emerged every winter. As a famous slave owner of the arena, Liga was very close to the Torrens of Thunder Cliff. Hence, after this season's gladiatorial matches ended, he would send his victorious teams to Thunder Cliff as usual. These are magic shackles. Apart from preventing you from leaving the carriage, you can maintain a certain amount of freedom, Liga instructed before he left. In the spacious carriage, William, Valilla, and Brawl could get almost any delicacy they wanted. During the journey, as long as they had a request, they just had to instruct the escorts, and someone would rush over to fulfill it. This was because behind their chariot, which looked like an Azeroth version of a cash carrier, there were two other chariots, both filled with food and drinks. Brawl Bearskin took a sip of nectar. What a pity. This isn't true freedom. Valilla's eyes flickered, and she waved the magic shackles on her wrists. Liga won't give us a chance. These are top-grade magic shackles. Unless the two legendary Breaking Dawn archmages, Duque and Ronin, ordinary Radiant Moon wizards can't break them by force. Sai, we're his cash cow. Let's think about how we're going to defend our title next year. Duque. William shuddered when he heard this name. He felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He raised his head abruptly. Valera, say the names of those two Breaking Dawn wizards again. Ronin. No, the former one. William was extremely nervous. Duque. The strongest human wizard, Breaking Dawn Archmage Duke Marcus. What's wrong? Logosh? Heavens? I remember this name. That's right. I have a very deep impression of this name. Varian covered his head with both hands. Of course, we all have an impression of him because he was a legendary hero and commander of the Alliance, even though he went missing. Brol said. No, the latest news is that he has just returned at the end of December. As a thief, Valera's ears were sharper, but I don't think Duque's return will affect our fate in any way, so I didn't say anything. Brawl nodded in agreement at Valera's words. No, that's not it. That Duque and I aren't strangers who look up to each other but don't know each other. My heart told me that I knew him. I have a very close relationship with Duke Marcus. That's right. He was above his friends. Oh, my son's Christian name is also Duque. Wait a minute. My son? I have a son? The throbbing that came from the deepest part of his soul triggered a certain nerve in William. He was like a traveler who was about to die of thirst in the desert, suddenly grasping his last hope. That was an oasis in his soul that could save him. Even after so many years of hard work as a gladiator, the battles between life and death did not destroy him, was because William longed to be able to recover his memories and find his life. This was the only pillar of support he had when he was in the most pain and lost. Now, it was as if he had unraveled the fog and found his direction. How could William not be overjoyed? You have a son? Valera and Brawl were shocked at the same time, then overjoyed. Have you recovered your memories? Valera asked in surprise. No, William was at a loss again, but his intuition, which had been honed from countless battles in the gladiator arena, felt that his judgment was not wrong. I didn't recall everything, but I feel that after I find that Duke Marcus, I will remember more things. It's not difficult to find him. He's the Grand Duke of Stormwind? Valera was only halfway through her sentence when William was touched again. Stormwind City? Yes. I remember something again. I remember Stormwind City. It's a city of alternating blue and white. My God. Tell me about Stormwind City. Night Elf Brawl was completely clueless about Stormwind City, but Valera was different. She could be considered a blood elf. After Arthas destroyed Kuel Salis and polluted the Sunwell, she was ostracized by her people because she could barely belong to Prince Kael, that's faction. In addition, the entire Long Song forest was in a mess. Valera, who had lost confidence in her hometown, began her wandering life, which was why she was caught and became a slave gladiator. Before that, if there were any major events in the High Elf Society that would not change for thousands of years, the biggest would be Duque seducing the Ranger General Aurelia. From then on, Duque, who was a human duke from the southernmost part of the continent, Stormwind, entered the sights of the High Elves. Valera knew a lot about Stormwind City. As she explained, William's eyes lit up. Then the Iron Triangle of the Gladiator Arena decided on an escape plan. They were prepared to find a way to escape to the only human territory on this continent, Theramore. Finally, they would find a way to find a ship that was willing to ferry them back to Stormwind City. They waited for 4 whole days before they found an opportunity. The Feralas region could not directly reach Mogor's Thunder Cliff. The safer way was to go east through the Thousand Needles, then north to the southern part of the Barren Lands, and finally west to the peaceful and lush Mogor region. In the Thousand Needle Forest, Brawl thought of a way to attract a large pack of wolves, and very coincidentally, he also accidentally attracted an even more powerful rare elite wyvern Hatras. While the guards were in chaos, William forcefully smashed the magical formation on the roof of the carriage with his sword despite the recoil of his magic. Fortunately, the magic formation had not been repaired for a long time, so the backlash was not too strong. Otherwise, William's right arm would have been blown off. On a stone pillar in the Thousand Needles that looked like a tall tower, Duke and Jaina quietly watched the trio who had snatched 3 horses and charged forward, killing their way through the forest and leaving a trail of blood behind them. Why did you go through so much trouble? Jaina asked. Young people. Only when you fight for it with your life will you learn to cherish it. Chapter 11:10. Indeed. I can take William back directly and activate the next step of the plan to let William recover as soon as possible. If I can deal with the Black Dragon Princess, then the result will be that the great hero of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, has once again foiled the evil plot. Let's refresh my reputation that can't be upgraded. I've proven myself again, but what about Varian? Gianna was suddenly speechless. Yes. What about William? Perhaps from now on, William would become the cowardly person in the eyes of the people, the little king who couldn't even protect himself and needed the help of the older generation, Duque. The people might say, at the crucial moment Sir Marcus is still reliable. Then what? Would William, who was already in his 20s, once again play the role of the weak person who was protected under the wings of Duque and the other seniors? Duque continued to explain his point of view. History has proven to us time and time again that having a great teacher alone is not enough to produce a truly outstanding student. Take Arthas for example. Back then he learned from Uther, the greatest paladin in the entire alliance. However, he, who had never experienced any setbacks and tribulations, was tempted by evil because of his stubbornness and prejudice. He made mistakes step by step, which led to the complete fall of his soul. At the end of the day, it was because he had never suffered before. His path had been too smooth. Gianna fell silent at the mention of Arthas. Gianna had once looked forward to meeting Arthas. But fate had missed them, so they were only childhood friends. Even so, Arthas's fall still touched her greatly. She chose to listen quietly. A person cannot be tempered by good times. Blindly protecting him is actually harming him and not really doing it for his own good. Duque sighed. Facing the Calamity army that can expand its army infinitely, the foundation of the Alliance is still too weak. It can't withstand any torment. We can't even give William a few thousand soldiers to torment. At most, we can let him feel the atmosphere of the battlefield. That's already the limit. I've secretly checked. William is now in a strange state where his soul is split, but his body is being duplicated and split into 2. It was rare that in this state he could cast aside the aura of a king and experience life and death as an ordinary person. He could experience what friendship was, and he could taste the things that he could not learn while sitting on the throne. How could I possibly interrupt his growth? If he can recover, this rare gladiator experience will become one of the most precious treasures in his life. Valera and Brawl would also become his most capable helpers in overcoming the obstacles in the future. This is also the best training for William that I can do for Lang and Anduin. Duque's words shook Jaina to the core. She had never thought that Duque would put so much thought into it. It could be said that it was because of Anduin Lothar and Lang Rin's trust that Duque could rise like a comet and become the brightest star in the sky. Along the way, Duque, who had achieved success and almost controlled the entire alliance, did not abandon Stormwind, which had nurtured him. Instead, he used this roundabout method to nurture a better and more outstanding king for Stormwind. Putting oneself in someone else's shoes, one should repay kindness with kindness. Indeed, this is the Duque that I'm infatuated with. Jaina's heart was a little infatuated. Unfortunately, she and Duque were not the only ones here at the moment. Duque's words were not for her to hear. 5 meters behind Duque, a figure bowed to Duque and said, "I admire your foresight and effort, Grand Duke. I will convey your words to Regent for Dragon." Matthias Shaw, you just have to be careful not to let irrelevant people enter His Majesty Varian's trial field. Keep a distance of at least half a day from them, and pay special attention to Valilla Segunar. Her skills are not inferior to yours. Matthias was the head of Storm City's MI7, and the head of intelligence that had been deeply trusted by the Storm royal family ever since King Lang. This time, it was he who had been sent by Bolivar to oversee the affair. On the surface he reported directly to Bolivar, but someone as smart as Matthias, of course, knew who the real boss of Storm City was. In front of Duque, he also knew that he could not become Duque's confidant, but he still meticulously completed every order from Duque. This was good for him, for Bolivar, and for Stormwind. After bowing his head and agreeing, Matthias' figure disappeared into thin air. Gianna, enough is enough with your acting. No king wants to be deceived or fooled. Once William arrives at Theramore, or if the people we sent to follow him are discovered, show yourself and tell William the truth. Understood. And after that? After that, it's time to prepare the Valentine's Day plan. The Valentine's Day plan was, of course, a large-scale plan. If Duque did not say it, no one would have thought that Duque would do this. Of course, that was not Jaina's main point. Back then I thought that Valentine's Day was specially set up for me. You even made me wait for you for a full 10 years, from a young girl to an old lady. Jaina put her hands on her hips, looking angry. Old lady? Where is that? The bastard Duque made a gesture of looking into the distance, pretending not to see. There is only an eternal beauty around me, the 18-year-old Queen Kurtiras who will not age. What old lady? I really don't see her. If Jaina was really the old princess who had waited for Duque for more than 10 years and became an auntie, Jaina would probably really flip out. Life was eternal, and age no longer had any meaning. With eternal life, one's appearance and body would be fixed at the peak of the human body at 18 years old. In the end, their appearance was getting older and older. In the past few years, Jaina and Alicia even had to secretly put on makeup to make themselves look more mature. Perhaps this was also a kind of blissful worry. He did not know how to continue lying in the future, but for the time being, Duque's remedial measures still made Jaina unable to be angry. After a gentle kiss, Jaina left. It was mid-January, and more news began to spread within the borders of Stormwind. After nearly 2 weeks of discussion among the nobles finally launched a counterattack against Duke under the leadership of Countess Katrana and Risto after Duke's promotion of the feudal lord's power. After several meetings with King Varian, who was sitting in Stormwind Fortress like a fool, the muddle-headed King Varian suddenly announced that the nobles' fiefs were sacred and inviolable. If he wanted to weaken the power of the vassals, it would be a challenge to his and the entire human world's royal authority. He hoped that Duque would retract his decision, or else he would have to consider Duque's Grand Duke status. Chapter 11:11. This was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. In this era, although there were many incidents that affected the dignity of the royal family, the biggest one being Arthas patricide, the deeply rooted royal power that had been around for more than 2,800 years still deeply affected the majority of the people. They blindly believed in the king, and firmly believed that it was right and proper for them to serve the king and his lord. Hence, the matter of righteousness and reputation was rather important. Back then, Lang and Anduin had discussed that if Duque wanted to establish his own country, they would allow Duque to do so. That was something that was only known to the small circle of the highest echelons of the kingdom. Later, when Lang died, the last words he left behind said that Duque had the right to dismiss the king. In the hearts of the people, this was more like a performance of Lang's fairness and modesty. No one thought about how people would react if Duque really fulfilled the terms. The people only knew how powerful their own Grand Duke Duque was, and all their pride was based on Stormwind. In the past 20 years, Duque and Lang had been intentionally or unintentionally made into a close monarch and subject. Duque was even described as the most loyal subject in the world. Although Duque had always been self-conscious, it still had a certain degree of restraint on Duque. This was the problem of image. Now that the current King William had made such a declaration, it was definitely disadvantageous to Duque. At the end of the day, Duque was still William's subject in name. If Duque said that he wanted to limit the power of the nobles, the king would say that he would not give it to them. Once a fight broke out, it would not be a blessing in Stormwind no matter what. At least in terms of public opinion, the direction of public opinion had become a little chaotic. In the secret room of Storm Fortress, Bolvar apologized to Duque profusely. I'm sorry, Duque. It's my fault. But I really can't think of any way to stop them from meeting His Majesty. His Majesty is also soft-hearted. I don't know why he suddenly agreed to make such a declaration. Sigh, I'll go and persuade His Majesty again. Duque grabbed Bolvar. There's no need to go. I don't care about what His Majesty does. As long as you don't have to worry about the grudge you have against me, I'll be happy. Grudge. Bolvar sat down dejectedly. All right, I have to admit that after you returned, I had some complaints about you in my heart. When the late king was assassinated, Lothar and I were the ones holding the fort. Of course, I know that you are trapped outside for the Alliance and even for this world, but I still feel a little uncomfortable. Yes, I'm sorry. I've been neglecting the development of Stormwind for the past few years. Duque sighed. Please forgive me. After you returned, I was angry with you. After all, I was thinking that if you were here, this wouldn't have happened. Now that I think about it, I was actually looking for excuses for my incompetence. Bolvar was still the same Bolvar who was hailed as the role model of a holy knight. Duque gently patted Bolvar on the shoulder. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Don't give yourself too much pressure. Anyway now, the other king variant has been found and ensured safe. Then what do we do with the two kings now? Duque had a headache. The historical variants split up and then merged back into one. There was a rather unscientific logic to it. The Princess of the Black Dragon's attack patterns were so diverse. How could he determine that it was a spell that could restore Varian's original appearance, and not the famous, deep breath? In reality, there wouldn't be such an eye-catching notification like, Onyxia took a deep breath. Who knew if it was a big breath of dragon breath or just a normal breath of turbid air? After all, Duque had only let the 4 Dragon Kings take the lead and finish off the Wings of Death the last time. Duque did not have the experience of fighting a demigod-level dragon. Many things could only be tried once. With the system's data, he would be able to make a more accurate judgment. Duque pondered for a while and finally said, "This is an evil spell. The fastest and most convenient way is to find the caster. Fortunately, we all know where she is. This is also the reason why I've been secretly carrying out that plan ever since I returned." Bolvar's eyes lit up, but then he thought of something. There's another problem. Regarding Her Majesty's declaration, Duque smiled mysteriously. To destroy it, one must first make it mad. During this period, as long as I don't die, you don't have to worry about me. Bolvar thought of the nobles who had gathered around the Princess of the Black Dragon like sharks that had smelled blood, and he couldn't help but grimace. On the 20th of January, Duque was summoned by King Varian to the Storm Fortress and engaged in a heated debate with the conservative nobles in front of the king. The topic revolved around the vassal's rights and duties and even royal authority. Royal authority? Her Majesty's authority is bestowed by the heavens. It is sacred and inviolable. Her Majesty extends her authority according to the will of the heavens. The nobles are Her Majesty's arms and fingers, so the nobles' authority is sacred and inviolable. Countess Katrana sanctified the nobles' authority from the very beginning. Royal authority is not innate. Without Thoradin the Great struggle 2,800 years ago, there would not be the Arathar Empire, and there would not be the 7 kingdoms. Moreover, the Arathar Empire has already perished, as has the Stromgarde Kingdom, one of the 7 kingdoms. Duque retorted. That's because the heavens withdrew their blessings on these 2 kingdoms. Duke Marcus, do you dare to say that there are no gods in this world? Katrana's words were sharp. Generally speaking, the debate between idealism and materialism was nonsense. Neither could convince the other. In a situation where science was not sufficiently developed, it would be a disaster if idealism led the conversation in a direction that could not be proven by materialism. It was a pity that this was Azeroth, a world where souls could be seen with the naked eye, and where even gods frequently appeared. Although humans did not believe in the goddess of the moon, Elun, most of them knew of her existence. In addition to the existence of mysterious people like mages, warlocks, and priests, the result was that the royal authority theory was very popular. As soon as Katrana finished speaking, all the nobles, including the neutral knights, could not help but nod. Duque did not have any good ideas in the debate. He could only explain his position from the different demands of the new era nobles on the progress of society and the development of productivity. For example, the impact of banning the circulation of goods and increasing the circulation cost on society. Unfortunately, such things were believable and everyone knew that it was right. However, breaking the chain of interests of the old interest groups was a huge matter that would make the nobles jump in anger. It's good that you, Duque, help us earn money, but if you take back the money that you give us every year, then you, Duque, will become our enemy. Moreover, that cowardly William was probably under mind control now. Whatever Duque said, William would always respond with a tortoise recite scriptures, and not listen. Chapter 11-12. In terms of combat, Duque could single-handedly wipe out all the nobles except for a certain princess. In terms of arguing, Duque was confident that he wouldn't lose to anyone on the other side. The most detestable thing in the world was that the referee was biased. Previously, for the sake of ease of control, William, who was only left with a cowardly personality, had become a silly mascot for a long period of time. Now, in order to obtain victory in the realm of the nobles, the Princess of the Black Dragon was playing with mental dominance. William, who was sitting on the throne, said in a weak voice, "Respected Grand Duke Marcus, I also want Stormwind to be stronger and more fertile. Unfortunately, your views have shaken the foundation of the entire kingdom. I cannot agree with you." "Your Majesty, Duque looked like he still wanted to argue. "Sir Marcus, who gave you the right to interrupt His Majesty's speech?" On the surface, it seemed like Katrana's Princess of the Black Dragon was showing off her power. Her speech immediately gained the support of the nobles. Duque could only sullenly shut his mouth. The weak version of William continued, "The nobles are the foundation of the kingdom. If the foundation is destroyed, the kingdom will no longer exist. Your proposal to restrict the nobles' power is equivalent to destroying the foundation. If I agree, I won't have the face to meet the late king and Uncle Anduin after I die." Hearing this, even though Duque knew that this fellow was a puppet, he just wanted to cover his face and spit at William. "Damn it, I really want to show these nobles why the flowers are so red." At the same time, I can press this amusing version of William's head in front of Lang's grave to wake him up. However, for the sake of the plan, Duque could only pretend to be obedient. "Your Majesty." Duque strengthened his tone. As expected, Duque was ignored by the weak version of William. He continued to recite, "Dear Marcus, I can understand your original intention of wanting our kingdom to be strong and prosperous. But this time, I'm not only going to reject your proposal. I'm also going to reduce your territory as a warning. Please forgive me, Duke Marcus. I must set an example for the world's aristocrats, a role model. That is, the innate royal power. The aristocratic power is also an extension of the royal power." Not only was Duque a little stunned by these words, even Bolvar, who had always maintained a neutral stance, was dumbfounded. What was face slapping? This was a slap in the face. Generally speaking, as long as one did not commit treason, the king had no right to reduce the fief of his vassals. Now, Duque had proposed to reduce the power of the nobles, but Duque had raised this issue publicly during the annual meeting due to internal conflicts. Treason was definitely out of the question. If he were to reduce his title, it would be a little too much. Of course, the reason was also reasonable. More importantly, Bolvar knew that the timid William's mind was being manipulated, but he didn't dare to do so. For a moment, even an honest man like Bolvar was on the point of flying off the handle. Duque's thoughts were also spinning rapidly. At his position, he was no different from a king. But as long as he still acknowledged his position as a vassal of the House of Rin, he would definitely be at an absolute disadvantage politically. No, it should be said that in a sense, even if he were to be reduced by 1 square meter, it would be a slap in the face. The key now was how big Anixia's appetite was. If her appetite was small and only wanted to create Stormwind conflicts, she could let this puppet William announce that all of his fief would be reduced. This left Duque with 3 choices. First, he could expose her true colors and start a fight in Stormwind Fortress, just like in history. This would feel good, but the problem was that he would not be able to punish the nobles who supported her, as he lacked crucial evidence. Second, Duque could pinch his nose and accept it, but this would obviously be a huge blow to Duque's reputation. Third, Duque could rebel and declare independence. If Duque did not know that Katrana was the princess of the Black Dragons, he might have really done this. Doing so after knowing would definitely be the dumbest choice. If her appetite was average, she would only want William to symbolically reduce Duque's territory by one village. With this as a compromise, she would allow her forces to invade Duque's territory and seek a deeper infiltration. Of course, what Duque hoped the most was that the princess of the Black Dragons had a big appetite, as expected. William spoke, "I announce that I will take back all of the Marcus family's territories in the Elven Forest and the Twilight Forest." Almost in an instant, all sorts of emotions appeared in the meeting hall of Stormwind Fortress. There was surprise. There was anger. There was confusion. There was confusion. But more than that, there was anticipation. The nobles waited for Duque's reaction to see how the great hero of the Alliance of Stormwind would react. Were the nobles afraid? Of course they were afraid. If Duque were to kill everyone here in a fit of rage, they would not even have a place to cry. But they were also looking forward to it, longing for it, hoping that if Duque would bow his head and continue to be a good vassal, obligingly providing more wealth to the kingdom for them to squander, that would be the best thing that could happen. The humanoid Onyxia shot a provocative look at Duque. That pair of eyes that were clearly overflowing with mockery and intimidation seemed to be telling Duque, if you do not want to become the public enemy of the nobles in human society, you should pinch your nose and accept it. Duque. The best actor Duque. His face was a perfect representation of how a reformer felt when he fell from the clouds of hope into the abyss of pain. Was it anger because he did not strive? Or was it sorrow because he could not get a response from his lord? Anyone could imagine that under that agitated and twitching face, there was a deep rift between him and his lord, William. In the end, Duque still lowered his head. "Yes, Your Majesty." These two words seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. The meeting ended, and the news of Grand Duke Marcus being reduced in Stormwind spread like wildfire. It caused a tsunami in the Alliance. The nobles of Stormwind were originally full of joy and thought that this victory would become a role model for the Alliance. They thought that the nobles of various countries would jump out and impose heavy taxes on the trains that passed through their territories. However, there were no ripples. In particular, the queens of various countries publicly declared that if Stormwind treated Duque unfairly, they were willing to give a Grand Duke's territory in their kingdom to Duque. What made the nobles even more unprepared was that even though William, under the instructions of a certain dragon, had given all the confiscated territories to the nobles who had supported Duque as a reward for the political battle, their income didn't increase but declined instead. This was because overnight, all the trains stopped passing through their territories. All the train drivers, mainly the dwarves, went on strike and dismantled the locomotives in the name of maintenance. The originally rich daily necessities were all stopped, and all the luxury stores in Stormwind City that were related to the Marcus Merchant Guild refused to sell goods to the conservative nobles. What was worse was that rumors spread everywhere, saying that the nobles wanted to restore the right of the first knight, and the cruel rule of reducing the citizens to serfs, which directly led to the citizens fleeing in large numbers. All of a sudden, the nobles were also at a loss. At this time, the old butler of the Marcus family, Makarov, came to visit Countess Enristo and handed her a letter. There was only one sentence in the letter: "Valentine's Day, do you want to meet?" Chapter 11-13. Dating? Before Du transmigrated, this was definitely the most ambiguous word in a certain social media app. But at this point in time, it had a very subtle and magical effect. As a black dragon who infiltrated the human world and mingled with the nobles, Onyxia was indeed a strange dragon with high political attributes. It was precisely because she knew that it was impossible to take away all of Duque's fiefs, that she set her sights on the power struggle from the start. The Marcus family's power in Stormwind was not without reason. Firstly, the Marcus family's territory was the largest, and secondly, the Marcus family had a frightening number of ways to make money, and the taxes from their territory only accounted for less than 1% of their total income. It would be too fake if a family that controlled almost all of the kingdom's economic lifelines did not retaliate. Duque's current approach was a classic example of a lose-lose situation. The nobles did indeed control all the railways leading to the Red Ridge Mountains, the Swamp of Sorrows, and the Cursed Land. They also claimed that if Duque did not yield, they would continue to raise taxes from 100% tolls without limit. Duque simply did not allow the trains to pass through, nor did he allow any transport vehicles to enter the elven forest. After all, trains had been used in the forest for more than 15 years, and the cheap train transportation had long since destroyed all the traditional horse transportation industries. If not for the fact that the technology to shrink the steam engine had not yet matured, and there were no cars, perhaps even horse carriages would have to leave Stormwind. Currently, horse carriages were mostly responsible for secondary transportation. If they were suddenly asked to bear the heavy burden of long-distance transportation, the amount of transportation was simply a drop in the ocean. Duque's stopping of the train was undoubtedly a blow to the Marcus family's trade, but it also damaged the supplies to the Cursed Land's Overwatch stronghold. The fish from the Red Ridge Mountains and the conversion of the Swamp of Sorrows into farmland were barely enough to meet the needs of the Overwatch stronghold's garrison. But that was during peaceful times. Once war broke out, the army would flood into the Overwatch stronghold, and it would be utterly inadequate. Now, if the Overwatch stronghold wanted to obtain other supplies, it had to pass through the dock set up at the Reed Coast. But there was another problem. There was the Temple of Hacker in the middle of the Swamp of Sorrows, an area that Duque had strictly forbidden to explore. Therefore, the passage from the northern part of the Swamp of Sorrows to the Reed Coast dock was not completely safe. Therefore, the high toll of the nobles would definitely not last for long. If the Overwatch stronghold, the Alliance's greatest defense system, was damaged, Duque could use his status as the Alliance's commander-in-chief to push down the huge hat of damaging the Overwatch stronghold's defense system and allowing demons into the world of Azeroth, and the nobles would have to bear the consequences. The current Storm nobles were much cleaner than the ones from the first year of the Dark Portal. Unfortunately, it was still not clean enough. Back then, Duque had used the Bloodsail pirates to exterminate the nobles, but failed to obtain Lang's full support. As a result, he had left behind a trail. When Duque had gone missing twice, Lang had allowed quite a number of noble descendants to inherit the main family and restore their family names. Perhaps it was out of the mentality of compensation, or perhaps it was because he felt that the meeting hall was too empty. It was just that Lang had never thought that after his and Lothar's deaths, the restoration of the aristocratic forces would be so fierce. Moreover, as the regent, Bolvar, was also a great noble. As a result, a new batch of parasites was born. These fellows did not have the courage to go head-to-head with Duque. From their point of view, as long as they kept their power, Duque would still be able to give them the toll, and that would be perfect. After Duque's actions caused both sides to suffer, the voices of the conservatives asking for peace also became prevalent. The nobles all told Katrana to stop while she was ahead. The Black Dragon Princess was here to cause trouble, and before she had completely seized the highest power in Stormwind, she did not want to shed all pretense of cordiality. Therefore, from her point of view, Duque was using the excuse of a Valentine's Day date to ask for peace. A good excuse. It also suits his identity as the Duke of Chastising. The Black Dragon Princess, who had transformed into Katrana, smiled faintly. A few dukes came up to her, then, "Enristo, what are you going to do?" "Of course I will go. The essence of politics is to compromise. Since there is no benefit to either side, peace talks are the only way out. If Grand Duke Marcus is willing to give up his queen's lovers, and the price is high enough, how about I marry him? If he only found out that I was a dragon on his wedding night, and I tore him apart, the great hero of the Alliance with only half of his body left. That expression would be great." Onyxia's evil and charming smile was seen by the nobles as having a card up her sleeve. The stagnation of the logistics caused a considerable degree of chaos within the kingdom, but there were two places that were not affected. One was the Western Wilderness, where the railway was still supplying supplies to the pioneering army that was developing the territory in Stranglethorn Vale. The second was Stormwind City. Although the supplies that were supposed to be transported to the Elven Forest were all piled up in the warehouses of Gold's Higher Town, the supplies supplied to Stormwind City were still there. It seemed that the upcoming Valentine's Day event on the 14th of February was not affected at all. The army continued the tradition of more than 10 years, routinely giving all soldiers who were not on urgent missions or on guard duty a holiday. A large number of soldiers in civilian clothes poured into the streets of Stormwind City, dressed up with a few months' worth of military pay in their hands, so that it was convenient to express their love, or directly buy gifts for their girlfriends that they had not seen for a while. As one of the large-scale series of activities to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Alliance, Stormwind City held a big event on Valentine's Day this year. The Marcus family took advantage of their developed marine products to have the Nagas bring a large number of incomparably beautiful giant corals and shells from the bottom of the sea, and then specially made a lover's island in the center of the Mirror Lake outside Stormwind City. It was a hollow man-made island with a zigzag interior. Couples could spend up to 10 silver coins to rent a beautifully decorated two-person boat and row into the caves of Lover's Island. In the deep but well-lit waterway, they could listen to the melodious violin and piano concerto that could be heard all over the island while admiring the decorations on both sides of the waterway that looked like the Dragon Palace in a fairy tale. They could enjoy the romance and warmth. There were a total of 1024 waterways provided to ordinary people, each of which was 300 meters long and had a time limit of 10 minutes. There were 108 waterways provided to the upper class, each of which cost 10 gold coins and had a time limit of 90 minutes. There was also a small private dock at the end of the waterway that could be uploaded, providing all kinds of services. As for the highest grade of waterways, there were only a mere 12, and the fee was even more exorbitant, as high as 1,000 gold coins. He did not know about the others, but in any case as early as 3 days before Valentine's Day, the nobles who used it all said it was good. Chapter 11:14. It was said that the idea came from Duque. It had to be said that Duque's new invention was deeply loved by the nobles. If it wasn't for Duque wanting to deprive them of their power, Duque would have continued to be the most loved person among the nobles of Stormwind City. Who asked Duque to come from a place with an explosion of information? Not to mention the props seen in the 10 terabytes porn, just the lover boat that Duque made according to the Valentine's Day event in the game had instantly killed the hearts of all the noble girls. It was obviously the simplest sampan, with 2 heart-shaped backrests and red velvet sofa cushions. Then, the bowstrings of the sampan were inlaid with a shiny silver iron sheet similar to silver. The bow and stern of the sampan were elegantly curved, with a heart-shaped pendant hanging from each of them. They were even made of red glass. The whole set only cost around 10 silver coins. Adding the corals and shells in the sea to make a large island, the lowest fee was 10 silver coins. One had to know that apart from labor, everything else was free. You had an idea. The Valentine's Day event in Stormwind City was open to the commoners, and it could earn at least tens of thousands of gold coins. Moreover, the top waterways were almost fully booked the moment they were released. Except for one. On the night of February 14th, this was a day that caused unlimited damage to single dogs. It was useless to be handsome if he couldn't get a date, he might as well go to the hospital for a vasectomy. Countess Katrana and Risto pretended to be low-key as she arrived at the Mirror Lake. As soon as her carriage arrived at the lake, it caused a commotion. It's Countess Risto. I heard that she will soon be promoted to a marquis by His Majesty. She's so beautiful. Oh my God. Who is she going on a date with? Our Stormwind City's rare beauty is finally going to fall? Who is it? Who is it? However, the person who appeared in front of Countess Risto made the nobles beat their chests and stomp their feet. It was an old butler with braided silver hair, a well-groomed appearance and a black tuxedo. Everyone recognized him as the Marcus family's butler, Makarov. He, who used to be the head of a small mercenary group, had already served the Marcus family for 20 years. His mercenary temperament had already faded and was replaced by a dignified etiquette that countless veteran aristocrats had no choice but to approve of, as well as a graceful bearing that surpassed many lesser aristocrats. He gently invited the countess down, and slowly led the countess to the side, which was also the largest pier. When the countess' figure disappeared behind the wooden wall outside the dock, countless male nobles' hearts broke. Another peerless beauty was about to fall? No. Just as the elders in the family had said, Countess Risto was here to negotiate. On the small dock, Katrana looked at the empty love boat and frowned. There was nothing wrong with this special crystal boat. Under the inlaid silver crystal pieces, the entire boat was like a work of art, appearing extremely beautiful. The swan head and the neck of the ship's bow could easily arouse the maiden heart of any woman. However, the protagonist was not here. Since she was here for a date, she could not bring her staff like she did on other occasions. Today in her right hand was a folding fan embellished with black velvet. On the surface, Countess Risto was still a powerful radiant moon mage. The countess opened the folding fan, fanned herself and asked unhappily, "Where is your master? Making a lady wait is not what a gentleman should do." "I'm here." Accompanied by a slight magical wave, Duque's entire body appeared out of nowhere and appeared behind the countess. When he spoke, He inadvertently breathed out hot air, and it just so happened to be on the Countess' slender white neck. This terrible touch gave the Black Dragon Princess goosebumps. For a moment, Onyxia wanted to turn around and give someone a deep breath. What a surprise. The princess, who still had the appearance of a countess, turned around elegantly, and then revealed a formal, no, a horrifying smile that could be classified as a fake smile. Would Duque, who had seen countless women and played the game of infernal affairs with the twins of Erida, be afraid of this? Would the Black Dragon Princess dare to show her draconic aura now? If it was an ordinary mortal, they would not even dare to move when faced with such an oppressive smile. You want to ask Duque if he dared to move? If he dared to move. Of course he dared to move. What kind of person was Dooku without integrity? He knew that the Black Dragon Princess was in a bad mood, but he still went forward and stretched his claws towards the waist and thighs of the Black Dragon Princess. There were 3 choices in front of the princess. One was to fall out with Duke and leave angrily, without knowing what kind of price he was going to propose. The second was to submit, but she was in a bad mood, so how could she choose this? So she chose the third. She immediately cast a spell to resist. The white light of frost magic suddenly lit up on her graceful female body. Who knew that Duque's moral integrity would be so low as to use counterspell immediately? I've seen shamelessness, but I've never seen such shamelessness. The Black Dragon Princess disguised Radiant Moon Magic Circuit was obviously not a match for the Breaking Dawn level Duque. Unless she exposed the power of the Black Dragon hidden under the disguise of the Magic Circuit, she was nothing more than a weak woman who had lost her magic power when all the magic circuits were sealed. And according to his calculations, the Breaking Dawn level counterspell was enough to mess up her magic circuit for 5 minutes. Wait. What are you trying to do? If you mess around, I'm going to scream. Scream all you want. No one will come even if you scream yourself hoarse. Besides, I won't do anything to you. Duque had a mischievous smile on his face as he stretched out his hand. Onyxia felt aggrieved. She didn't want to expose herself, but she also didn't want Duque to have his way. That was impossible. Even if she forcefully lifted her calf and used her fist to hit Duque's head, how could a weak girl like her resist the strength of a grown man? Just like that, Duque carried Onyxia in a standard princess carry, grabbing her by the waist and clasping her thighs. Duke Marcus, put me down. Put me down. Duque ignored the Black Dragon Princess protests and carried her off the boat. Makarov was a mortal after all, and didn't know the Black Dragon Princess' identity. He was only surprised at his master's impatient behavior. Wasn't this almost like forcing himself on her? He knew very well that Duque wasn't that kind of person. What was Duque doing? Chapter 11:15. But no matter what, Makarov had to be on the same side as Duque. Suppressing his doubts, he held onto the bow of the boat and allowed Duque to board. Yet, his behavior had evoked another thought in the Princess of the Black Dragon, that Duque was doing this on purpose. Then the question was, why would Duque do this to her? In the next second, the Princess of the Black Dragon thought she understood everything. Duque wants me to lose my composure so that he can gain the upper hand in the upcoming negotiations. If I were a real noble lady, I would not have such boldness. But who am I? I am the Queen of the Black Dragon, Onyxia. The Princess of the Black Dragon had made up her mind. If Duque did anything out of line, she would activate the powerful magical instrument she had prepared long ago and teach Duque an unforgettable lesson. She didn't struggle and just let herself be hugged by Dooku. His deep black eyes seemed to be able to shoot out dragonfang blades, piercing through Dooku's heart. Unfortunately, her stubbornness and resistance only lasted for a second. When Duque carried her off the boat, his hand seemed to have slipped. Because of his stature and the length of his arms, Duque's right hand seemed to have stretched forward a little. 3 fingers poked the side of the dragon peak on the right. It's soft. Ah. This time, Onyxia finally let out a very feminine exclamation. Disembarking from the boat, the gentlemanly Duque, who looked like an honest and reliable young man, turned around and asked with concern, "What's wrong? On purpose? On purpose?" Staring at Duque's face that was separated from his facial muscles by the system elf, Onyxia was confused. She could only grit her teeth and said angrily, "It's nothing." Sit down, I'm about to set sail." Onyxia gently sat on the red velvet sofa at the bow of the ship with one hand leaning on the side of the ship made of crystal. Onyxia held her cheeks in her hands, and there was still anger on her face, but her mind had already spread out. Compared to the dark cave in Dust Wallow Swamp, which only had lava, flames and pillars, human inventions were much more luxurious and classy. Although she was a dragon, it didn't mean that she didn't like those shiny things. Sitting on this dazzling crystal ship, she felt an indescribable sense of happiness even though she thought she had seen many things. Especially when the boat left the dock and was exposed to the lake, this feeling was even stronger. The lover's boat for the commoners was wrapped in silver like iron. But without comparison there would be no Shanghai. Because the second gear of the lover's boat was directly wrapped in very thin silver, it was even more shiny. However, Duque's boat had a crystal shell. Under the moonlight and the fire on the shore, as well as the magic lights on Lover's Island, the visual effect was even more stunning than the descent of the moon goddess. On the surface of the lake, countless envious and hateful gazes were cast over, which made Onyxia's vanity suddenly soar. This feeling is not bad. All of this was thought up by this very innovative human in front of me. Should I capture this guy in the future, enslave him, and then force him to specially design the decoration of my dragon cave? Of course, Duque didn't know that Onyxia was such a black dragon. He only knew that this female black dragon was very creative and very human. Faced with the sudden gaze, Duque almost thought that he had been exposed, and was ready to shoot an arrow through the clouds, and thousands of soldiers and horses will come to meet. Unexpectedly, the black-haired humanoid black dragon princess glanced over with her slightly phoenix-like eyes. Your creativity is not bad, I like it very much. Well, phoenix-like eyes were just a description. These were clearly dragon eyes, okay. That was domineering as if she wanted to collect all the beauty in the world into her own treasure vault. Faced with the black dragon princess's burning gaze, Duque put down the oars on his hands and bowed slightly. My little invention, if it makes you happy, I'm very honored. The waterway from the dock to Lover's Island was less than 200 meters. Every boat had a number that corresponded to a waterway on the island. The waterway specially prepared for the black dragon princess naturally had a beautiful entrance. The 7-foot-tall red coral was like a huge red fan, standing right above the entrance of the waterway. 12-foot-tall white crystal pillars stood on both sides of the waterway entrance. This red and white combination immediately made the waterway entrance look extremely high-end and classy. As soon as they entered the waterway, they could see that the walls of the 2-meter semicircle were full of gorgeous murals. It was a super long mural depicting the beautiful water world. Every part of the mural that involved stone, coral, and crystal must have been inlaid with the real thing. The real curves, together with the beautiful music that seemed to play automatically after entering the cave, made people feel like they were in a dreamy fairy tale world. How did you draw this mural? It seems like this Lover's Island was only built a few days ago, right? Even Onyxia, who thought she was experienced and knowledgeable, was deeply shocked. I drew it. With a snap of Duque's fingers, a few hands of magic appeared out of thin air. They took out a few brushes from the portal bag and sketched a few times in the air. A trace of greed flashed in Onyxia's eyes. She was more and more determined to capture Duque and make him a craftsman. At this moment there was a sudden commotion outside. Demons! Demons! Accompanied by screams and screams, an alarm suddenly rang by the lake. What's going on? Frowning, Duque immediately activated the magic transmission. In the air above the waterway, an illusory figure emerged. It was a male court mage. Onyxia recognized him as Druids. This guy was a conservative on the surface, but in fact he was a dragonoid mage under her command. As a precaution, she secretly arranged for him to be in charge of the security of Lover's Island today. Sorry, Grand Duke Marcus, a bastard registered warlock did not inform us in advance and summoned his succubus on Lover's Island. He wanted to have sex with his succubus, and triggered the demonic alarm of the magic circle. Onyxia almost spat out. What the hell was this? She knew that warlocks who played with evil powers and enslaved demons had never been well liked by the public. Even if the mages and priests had reconciled with the warlocks during the Dalajan War 5 years ago, it did not mean that warlocks had become popular. It wasn't unusual for a warlock that nobody liked to do something with his beautiful succubus. But it just had to happen at this time. This was really, Duque was not in a good mood. Teach that guy a lesson according to the rules and then send him away. After checking Lover's Island, appease the people. If you want to continue, continue. If you don't want to pay twice the fare. Understood. Druids bowed deeply. At the same time he secretly made a gesture that only Onyxia could understand. Safe. Chapter 11:16. Safety Awareness. This was a must. Onyxia would never forget how her father had died. Although she hated her father and her own birth, after all, it was her father who raped her mother, Sinestra, that gave birth to her and Nefarian. This was because her mother was the strongest, and did not die even after soaking in acid. However, she had to admit that Nesario, as a dragon, was definitely worthy of the title of a powerhouse. If it wasn't for this cunning human in front of her ruthlessly plotting against Nesario, allowing the 4 dragon kings to turn the tables and kill her father, it would probably still be the situation where the black dragons dominated the 5 major dragon clans. The death of Nesario, who she almost regarded as an enemy, also gave her a rare freedom. She could no longer be bullied by her father and be forced to do this and that like a slave. Of course, this did not mean that she had to be grateful to Duque. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This was only based on the fact that the enemy still existed. If the common enemy was gone, what about the relationship? Of course it was her, the great black dragon queen, who had the final say. Gently waving her fan, Onyxia even had the time to look around. This was a very shallow waterway. The water was probably only knee-deep, but the surrounding decorations were really beautiful. In addition to beautiful corals and crystals, there were all kinds of pearls, and even rare orbs of justice, and pieces of large magic light fragments. These were expensive materials that should have been used as high-level enchantments, but they were used as decorations. This kind of gorgeous and explosive decoration was very much to Onyxia's taste. Alright, Duke Marcus, don't mention the words date. We're all smart people. What conditions do you have? The Black Dragon Princess, who thought that she had everything under control, threw out the words directly. She was waiting to see how Duque would respond. But Duque. There was a mysterious look on Duque's face. I don't want to use such a lousy excuse like a date. It makes me seem like a fool who can't move his legs when he sees a beautiful woman. But I really can't think of a better excuse for me to get close to you. Is that so? I'm actually a little disappointed. Onyxia smiled as she shifted her legs. Tonight, she was wearing a long dress with a red base and black lace. Paired with the black lace suspender stockings that were invented and spread by a certain dude 15 years ago, she was as sexy as she could be. It was hard to tell when she was wearing formal clothes, but Onyxia was obviously the kind of perfect body that showed off her thinness and flesh. When she deliberately leaned against the red chair on the boat and crossed her legs, that absolute territory, that Dragon Valley, really stimulated Duze. Of course, Duque knew that she was deliberately showing off her femininity. Unfortunately, when he thought of her sharp fangs and how she could casually skewer him with just one of her dragon fingers, Duque shuddered. The beauty in front of him suddenly became dull and tasteless to him. Alright. What are the conditions? Onyxia was a little disappointed that her great seduction technique didn't seem to be good enough, but it was just a little. The condition is, do you know what fear is? Suddenly, without any warning, a vivid image appeared in Onyxia's mind. The world was chaotic. She struggled hard to break through this suffocating world. How long did she knock? She forgot. Anyway, when she finally succeeded in breaking the damn eggshell, the scarred black behemoth that appeared in front of her made Onyxia fall into the deepest shock. It was a terrifying exotic beast that was pitch black in color. On its jagged skin layer that resembled a lizard's, there was a pair of pale-colored, metallic horns that alternated between gray and white. On the bat-like black wings supported by bone, almost every key part had a huge, spiky horn, sharp and hard, full of violent beauty. What made her feel even more horrified was that the behemoth in front of her was covered with scars. On the shoulders, chest, abdomen, between the crisscrossed huge scratches, there were also traces of bone-deep corrosion. Those scars seemed to be from a long time ago, but even after such a long time, she could still feel the horror at that time. How could the behemoth in front of her survive such heavy injuries? Its thick and powerful tail with several spikes scratched the rugged reddish-black rock layer, making a sharp sound. It was coldly looking at her as she crawled out of the eggshell. The gaze wasn't just judging, it was clear to the point of almost materializing hatred and disgust. Onyxia shuddered. But when she raised her head, a familiar, intimate and terrifying feeling of absurdity welled up in her heart, causing her to shout out the first sentence in her life. No, it wasn't a sentence, it was a name. Xylo. Translated into the common language, it was Sinestra, that was her mother's name. The behemoth, no, her mother, Sinestra shuddered. Then she felt an even deeper disgust. She opened her huge mouth and let out a sulphurous breath, and the disgust in her vertical pupils deepened. Damn it, I only had 2 eggs with that bastard, and they're both true dragons with inheritance. The descendants of two colossal dragons were not necessarily true colossal dragons. Only the descendants who inherited their parents' wisdom could grow into dragons like their parents. Many times there would be all kinds of mutations, such as the eggs hatched being dragon men, half-dragon men, or even dragon beasts that pure-blooded dragons looked down upon. These inferior creatures were destined to have a low status in the dragon race. But from the sound of it, Sinestra would have preferred to give birth to such scum. Soon, Onyxia understood how her father forced her mother to give birth to her and her brother. It was a tragic childhood, a past that she couldn't bear to look back on. But why would she think of this now? Suddenly, a sharp pain interrupted her memories. By the time she regained her senses, a glittering divine artifact longsword had already pierced through her chest from behind. She immediately realized who had done it. Duke Marcus. Her deafening roar made the entire Lovers' Island tremble. The sound waves were so astonishing that even the people far away at the edge of the Mirror Lake could clearly hear it. The conservative nobles were dumbfounded. That's Countess Enristo's voice? How could it be so terrifying? Yes, terrifying. Angry. Violent. With endless murderous intent. Onyxia finally realized that she had fallen into a trap. Just like how Duque saw through her father's transformation spell, he saw through her now. The next moment, more than 100 portals suddenly opened around Lover's Island, and more than 10 powerful auras appeared. Chapter 11:17. This year's Valentine's Day, as one of the continuous events of the Alliance's 20th anniversary, was especially grand. In addition to the nobles who had their own appointments, Stormwind also organized a grand Valentine's Day ball in Stormwind Stronghold for couples to show off their love, as well as a chance for singles. Since the leaders of the conservatives and reformists had gone on a private date, this time, there was no such thing as a party for each faction. With the expectation of peace talks and the neutral knight faction's efforts, the overall atmosphere was quite good. Although the theme was Valentine's Day, there were fully armed knights performing war operas everywhere. This was a chaotic world. The continuous wars had long changed people's views, and the status of warriors and professionals had been infinitely improved. Almost every ignorant girl, under the influence of knight novels and government propaganda, longed for their man to be a great man who could protect them. Therefore war operas were very popular. There was also such a large-scale stage near Countess Enristo's manor. It was about the warriors of Stormwind bravely fighting against the evil Nagas who had been brainwashed by the Burning Legion in Azhara. Of course, the Nagas were played by male Nagas belonging to Stormwind. In Stormwind Stronghold, when the atmosphere was at its peak, Bolvar suddenly stood on the high platform, and under the spotlight of the magic lamps, clapped his hands and asked everyone to be silent. Now, please allow me to put on a Valentine's Day special for everyone. Valentine's Day special? Even Bolvar, who was always serious, was enlightened? The nobles were very curious. In the next second, an uproar rose among the crowd of nobles. Because in the huge magic mirror that was 10 meters by 10 meters, it was Duque and Countess Katrana who were rowing the boat. Is Duke for Dragon going to show us a live show? Some of the nobles burst into laughter. When everyone saw the beautiful countess adjusting her legs and almost revealing her absolute domain, the atmosphere of the scene instantly reached its peak. No one knew what Bolivar was doing with this live broadcast, but everyone's gossipy hearts were burning fiercely. Could it be that after signing the peace treaty, the two sides would immediately get married because of a political deal? Some young nobles even began to whistle. In the next moment the scene changed. Duque suddenly said, "Do you know what fear is?" In the ballroom of Storm Fortress, every noble felt that something was wrong. No one knew what Duque did to Countess Katrana. They only felt that the countess' face was blank for a very short period of time, not even half a second. In the next scene, Duque flashed behind the countess and pierced her beautiful chest with a slender golden sword. Ah! The noblewomen screamed. What is that bastard Duque doing? The male nobles roared. Not to mention the conservatives, even the knights clenched their fists and glared at Bolvar. In every eye was the same question, the same angry reproach. What do you mean, Bolivar? At a time like this, you want us to watch a despicable murder and a political coup? Past. This was definitely going overboard. Only the most despicable of nobles would resort to such underhanded methods as murder. Damn it. We were wrong about Duke Marcus. What great hero of the Alliance? He was a despicable person through and through. After losing in a political battle, he did not even dare to rebel. Instead, he used such a despicable method to murder his political enemy, and a beautiful woman at that? Duque he. Originally, an angry storm was gathering, and if it were to accumulate for a few more seconds, an angry volcano would erupt in the ballroom of Storm Fortress. But at this moment the scene suddenly changed. Countess Katrana Enristo, who was incomparably beautiful in the eyes of countless people, actually began to transform in the next moment. That beautiful face suddenly turned into a terrifying black lizard's face that was full of horny bumps. That pair of beautiful smooth arms that always maintained a graceful arc suddenly turned into giant claws that were terrifyingly strong. Behind that seductive backless dress, a pair of huge bat wings that seemed to be able to burst open a cave had appeared out of nowhere. Duke Marcus, that was the roar of an injured giant beast. That was also the roar of the Countess, who was perfect in their eyes. This was not only heard from the magic mirror, but also from the side of the mirror lake, which was at least 5 to 6 kilometers away from here. It was the same voice. Not only them but the entire Stormwind city heard this extremely terrifying roar. Bolvar had already put on half of his armor, and his servant beside him was helping him put on his pauldrons. He slammed a heavy two-handed sword into the ground and shouted, "Everyone listen up! Onyxia, the princess of the Black Dragon, has disguised herself as Countess Katrana Enristo and infiltrated the kingdom with the intention of subverting Stormwind, and even the entire alliance. The great regent Duke Marcus has led various strong men to besiege her. All subjects loyal to Stormwind, loyal to His Majesty Rin, listen up. Immediately arrest all of the Countess conspirators. Kill all of Countess Enristo's guards and servants. They are all dragon men." Wah! Screams, slaps, and the clanging of weapons could be heard. This was no longer the peaceful era of 20 years ago. Even if it was a large ball, at least the swords of the knights would be placed on the sword rack at the edge of the ball. With Bolvar's command, even the knights who had not received the slightest news immediately turned around and rushed to the sword rack to retrieve their weapons. On the other side, realizing that the matter had been exposed, more than 10 people disguised as low-level nobles began to attack. They suddenly turned back into tall dragon men and half-dragons, and with a wave of their claws, they indeed killed many of the nobles around them. Unfortunately, most of them were conservative people. Seeing the nobles who had been chatting with them moments ago turn into dragon men, and even cut their companions into pieces, the nobles could not help but scream. "Ah, ah, ah, ah." All the doors of the ballroom suddenly opened, and a few elite squads led by holy knights rushed in from all directions, charging towards the few dragon men. A moment ago, it was a warm and romantic ballroom, and the next moment, it had become a slaughterhouse. After taking care of a giant dragon man that was at least 4 meters tall, Bolvar finally understood Duque's good intentions. A mere dozen or so dragon men had already caused chaos in Fort Storm. If Onyxia, who was in charge, was still here, Fort Storm would probably have to be rebuilt again, and who knew how many people would die. Chapter 11:18. Outside the manor of the Countess of Enristo, the knights who had been performing an opera just a moment ago had suddenly become real. The audience saw the soldiers who had been singing loudly on the stage a second ago, and then immediately charged into Enristo Manor the moment they heard the commotion. They were all dumbfounded. Although a civil official immediately ran out to announce the Countess' crimes, the crowd only dispersed in shock after a series of inhuman roars and sounds of battle. "Kill. Leave no one alive in the manor. Don't hold back. Even if it looks like a young girl, it could be a dragon. Surrender is only allowed under the premise of absolute safety, and use the enchanted long sword, Dragon Slayer, to test its true form." Reginald Windsor did not know that in the original history, the day he exposed Onyxia's plot would be the day of his death. He would be killed by the Black Dragon Princess, and even Bolvar would not be able to save him. History had changed once again. Behind him, there was an endless stream of elite infantry, elite professionals, and half of the mechanized dwarven division. However, no matter how perfect Duque and Bolvar's ambush plan was, there were still mistakes. Many draconians had already washed away their countess status, and turned into ordinary humans to hide in various parts of Stormwind City. The officials had already opened the broadcast to announce this matter. Unfortunately, in order to keep it a secret, it was impossible to inform the patrols. When the draconians who looked no different from ordinary humans suddenly transformed and attacked, there were still many casualties in many places. Standing on the southern balcony of the Storm Fortress, looking at the light in the direction of Mirror Lake in the distance, Bolvar held his head and deeply blamed himself. "It's all my fault. I actually let so many evil beings into the core of the kingdom. No matter what everyone's focus was still on Lover's Island and Mirror Lake. There, the powerhouses of the Alliance and the Horde gathered. Kane, Grom, Varrock, and Wajin, the four Horde powerhouses followed Jaina through the teleportation gate. Among the warriors of the Alliance, there were the Rogosh version of Varian and the Bronzebeard brothers from Ironforge. The remaining four of the 5 Silver Saints, Turalian, Sidon, Tyrion and Gavin Radzi, along with Mograine, Abendis and Riadaline, were the strongest paladins in the world. The thieves consisted of the Van Cleef father and daughter, Gavalilla. The ranged attackers were the 4 Windrunner sisters. The mages were Duque, Jaina, Ronin, Elucia, Solarian, Gina Goldsword and Master Craftsman Jurban. There were no warlocks and the priests were Tyrande, Benedicta, Sally Matwin and Kalia. The druid is Brawl. This time, other than Lilith and him who were variables in history, the others were standard Hall of Famers. Duque had spent a lot of effort to form a 30-man team from the Hall of Fame, not just to beat Onyxia away. He wanted to capture Onyxia. No matter how bad it was, he wanted to get rid of her. Of course they had to capture him to save William. However, if they couldn't capture him and the goddess of fate wasn't on their side, they would have to kill him if the historical event of the 2 Williams merging into one didn't happen. Duque wouldn't let Onyxia go back to her lair no matter what. Her lair was in the Dustwallow Swamp, which could threaten Theramore and directly affect the wood and mineral trade between the Alliance and the Horde. This was why the Horde was willing to send the 4 beasts to help after Duque explained the situation to Thrall. Of course, Grom was very happy to finally have a chance to return the favor. After all, Duque had said that if he helped out, the favor between him and Grom would be cancelled. In addition, Kudrin Wildhammer had also pulled 2,000 Griffin Knights and 3 Dalajan high-grade mage teams to set up a magic formation outside the perimeter to hold the line. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this was an inescapable trap. Hearing the terrifying dragon roar on Lover's Island, Gavin Rad whistled. Why does the black dragon always like to run into the Alliance? The old one is dead, and the young one is here to deliver food? Why don't you think about the Horde? Woken rolled his eyes at Gavin Rad. Gavin Rad, don't be careless. Theon rolled his eyes at Gavin Rad. Yes, yes, yes. Gavin Rad promised. In fact, only Theon, who was also one of the 5 Silver Saints and was older, could suppress him. After all, his status was there. However, he didn't stop talking. Speaking of which, Boss Duque personally set up an ambush. There's no one who can escape on their own, right? And Arthas. Mograine clenched the Ashbringer in his hand. Eat the bread one bite at a time. Alessandro. Abendis laughed. Focus on what's in front of you. Everyone, the time is ripe. Duque will lead us on an expedition to Northrend. The one who spoke was Queen Kalia. Although the powerhouses of Rotterdam didn't want to see their queen go to the front lines, Kalia's words, "Are you looking down on Sylvanas, Jaina and Elucia?" choked them to death. They all knew about the relationship between their queen and Duque. They could only lament that the women of the Duque family were all arrogant and leading them astray. Speaking of which, Kalia wasn't weak. Just based on the power of holy light, she was definitely at the level of a regional bishop. They could only let her participate in the battle. At this time, under the spells of the mages on the periphery, the not-too-big Mirror Lake began to freeze. Relying on the spiked shoes that had been prepared in advance, every powerhouse could easily stand on the ice. Duque's figure appeared. I've injured her, but it's not enough. Everyone prepare for the second stage. As soon as Duque's voice fell, an even more furious roar of the giant dragon sounded. A ball of flames that seemed to have come from a fiery purgatory suddenly spewed out from every channel. Even though the powerhouses had already maintained a safe distance, they were still a little speechless. The artificial outer shell of Lover's Island exploded under the dragon's breath, but there were no splashes of debris. Instead, all the crystals and corals that were blown into the air showed a strange stagnation. Duque waved his hands and his entire body shone with arcane light. He and Ronin cast a spell together, clearing away the stagnant debris in the air, revealing the true appearance of the things hidden in the outer shell of Lover's Island. They were 108 huge crystal prisms that had long been polished to an incomparably sharp level. Each of them was as tall as a 2-story building, and was enough to be the pillars of a house. However, at this moment they were more like giant bolts that had been shot out by lightning. On their sharp tips, they emitted a frightening enchantment light. That was a special enchantment that had not appeared in history, taken apart from the famous Floor's dragon slaying technique outline. It was dragon slaying. Chapter 11:19. At the mention of Feeler's dragon-slaying technique, perhaps many veteran players would smile knowingly as they reminisced about it. Back in the day, many poor hunters relied on this thing to make a fortune, turning from a poor wretch into a rich tycoon overnight. It was all because they obtained this book from the mallet of misfortune. 10,000 years ago, the High Elves were the most courageous race to challenge the taboo, and they even developed a whole set of techniques to deal with giant dragons. Of course, it was not aimed at the dragons under the Sleeping Dragon Temple, but at the wild dragons and dragon subspecies that had wandered outside. The Feeler's dragon-slaying technique was a collection of all dragon-slaying techniques. It was rare for Duque to make a trip to the mallet of misfortune, so how could he not bring this thing back? With Duque's clear guidance, the father and daughter duo painfully flipped through thousands of dusty books before they easily found their target. The dragon-slaying technique would naturally trigger a chain quest, which then turned into the unquenched ancient blade in Abendis's hands. As long as he threw it at the Black Dragon Princess before she died, she would spit out a mouthful of dragon breath. After the Black Dragon Princess died, he would return with the unquenched ancient blade and turn in the quest. Then it would become the famous defensive sword, Quell the Lar. Although this sword looked like a huge machete used by the Celestial Empire to slay devils, it couldn't be helped if it was called a sword. It was like a certain island country calling a katana a sword. Ignoring the fact that this dragon-slaying sword could only be used to show off, Duque's biggest discovery was an enchantment formula that had never been discovered by players: dragon slaying. Similar to Demon Slayer, this kind of enchantment specifically targeted dragons could increase the damage of weapons against dragons by 10% to 20%. So, as long as it was used well, even an ordinary weapon could become a killing machine. A moment ago, Onyxia could not sense any danger. Of course, this was because Duque had not completed the enchantment. Just as the plan was revealed, Duque not only stabbed the Black Dragon Princess in the back with his godly sword, but also enchanted the crystal pillars with Magician's Hand. Enchantment was a superb technique that used magical materials to add special effects to all kinds of equipment. However, with the help of the system elves that could use magical power to the last 10 decimal places, Duque didn't even need to do it himself. He could instantly turn those seemingly harmless enchantment materials into enchantments that specifically targeted the dragon race. After blowing up most of Lover's Island, the sharp crystal prism fell with a loud crash. Roar. Following Onyxia's furious roar, a strange magical shield appeared above her huge black figure at lightning speed. Bang bang bang. That's right. Unexpectedly, the magic shield blocked more than 80% of the prisms, but there were still nearly 30 prisms that shot towards Onyxia. The Black Dragon Princess was frightened out of her wits. The dragon wings flapped, the dragon claws and the dragon tail swept, and the 5 prisms still pierced through her body after she used all her skills. Roar. It was an angry roar. It was also the cry of a trapped beast. She really wanted to flap her wings and fly away from this death trap on the spot, but just as she flapped her wings, she was shocked to find that the exploded Lover's Island still had a hemispherical frame, like a cage tightly covering her huge body. This is. The glistening yellow pupils suddenly focused on the man. Duque stood against the wind and smiled. A gift from the Dragon Sleep Temple, do you like it? Onyxia's huge black dragon body was trembling. Another trap. A trap that was even tighter than the one that killed her father, Nisario. From the failure of the political struggle, to the excuse of a date to lure her out of Stormwind City, and finally to the so-called Lover's Island, it was all a trap. She didn't expect that she would be trapped by such a chain of tricks and become a trapped beast in a cage. Do you think such a toy can trap me? Onyxia angrily snorted at Duque with her sulfur-smelling breath. Unfortunately, it was too far away and it was more like some kind of demonstration. If no one interferes, you might be able to break free. Duque curled his lips. What if there was a group of powerhouses interfering? A large group of powerhouses from the Alliance and the Horde, and even a few unruly fellows, chuckled as they approached Onyxia from both sides in small teams. The Oxhead chieftain, Kane, even patted the thick plate armor on his chest that had a clear frost aura. He carried the huge totem pole and strode forward with his head held high. Duke Marcus, you puny mortals actually dare to attack me? You have to understand your position, mortals, Onyxia snarled. Duque laughed shamelessly. That's not very convincing for you who has blood spurting out of your chest. He had never had the chance to figure out whether there was an inevitable connection between a dragon in human form and its original body in dragon form, but now he had figured it out. There was. Right in the middle of the black dragon's back and chest, The black dragon scales that covered the solid dragon body had disappeared, and a wound about the size of a wine barrel was gurgling with dragon blood. It corresponded to the sword wound. Did that mean that a dragon in human form was easy to kill? The answer was, of course, no. When Duque ambushed her, he clearly felt the rebound from his hand. If Onyxia hadn't been hit by his mind blast, and he was using a divine artifact, it wouldn't have been so easy to pierce through her body. Obviously, even in human form, Onyxia's defense was still at the level of a dragon. If he made a mistake, even if he used an epic-ranked axe to chop at her seemingly delicate neck in human form, the axe would still be bounced off. But so far everything was going smoothly. Bastard! Onyxia suddenly broke free from the crystal prism that pierced through her dragon wings and suddenly pounced at Duque, opening her dragon mouth that was full of fangs. Yo! Are you going to tell us that you usually have to leave your nest to find food? Duque mocked. In all honesty, Onyxia really wanted to say that, but Duque actually interrupted her. She became even angrier. Unknowingly, her momentum became fiercer. Who knew that in the next moment, Duque would disappear in front of her just like that? When she realized that it was actually Duque's illusion, a huge Tauren had already come up to her. Come on, little lizard. Let your big brother ox play with you. The thick totem pole, which was as tall as a building, swept over unreasonably. The old ox in history was not as awesome as he was now. Because of a certain someone, Cain, who accidentally participated in the Battle of Mount Hygel in advance and split the spoils, was covered in gorgeous equipment. For him, the almost doubled strength value was like adding wings to a tiger. As the pillar went down, Onyxia felt as if she had returned to her childhood. That time she was so funny that she bumped into a mountain. Just like the last time, 2 of her dragon teeth were broken. Chapter 11:20. Bang, bang, bang. There was nothing but pain. The pain that came from all over her body made Onyxia feel as if her brain was going to melt from the pain. How long had it been since she experienced such pain? It seemed like she had never felt such pain since she came of age, other than from her father. Today there was finally a mortal name added to the list of people she hated, Duke Marcus. She was obviously very angry, angry at being tricked, angry at being fooled, angry at being provoked. All of the anger accumulated together, making her angry like an erupting volcano. But when 2 of her teeth were smashed by a pillar, she suddenly became a little more clear-headed. She felt that a little dwarf would be sent flying with a single slap, but when she slapped with her claws, it was as if she had slapped a pile of hard thorium ore. A guy emitting golden light was actually able to use a blazing hot divine sword to block her sweeping dragon tail. Who was he? Who was he? It was a kind of daze where even her thoughts were sluggish. Often after her moves were blocked, it would take a few seconds before Onyxia realized who had blocked her powerful attack. It was the famous master of the Iron Furnace Fort, Magni Bronzebeard. It was the famous deputy commander of the Alliance, Turalian, who wielded the divine sword, Quell Zarum. It was fine if it was these famous strong people in the Alliance, but there were some people who she could not even name who also caused her a considerable degree of pain. The 3 thieves moved like the wind, quickly brushing past her ribs and back at high speed. Every time a light touch like a dragonfly touching the surface of the water came less than a second later, it would be followed by an intense pain. Vanessa, Edwin, and Valera, who were wielding magnificent weapons, were like butchers dismembering an ox, cutting off her dragon scales one by one with their daggers. In the next moment, there would be 3 or 4 arrows filled with the power of nature shooting into her body through the wound, aggravating her injuries. That wound seemed to have become a new target, attracting the attacks of the mages. Then, from the wound, the surging magical elements could ignore the magic resistance of her dragon scales and dragon skin, directly causing damage in her body. After several rounds of continuous attacks, Onyxia felt that her incomparably strong body was gradually losing feeling. The sense of crisis in her heart grew stronger and stronger. It was only at this moment that Onyxia realized how serious the situation was. A true mortal expert had long surpassed her understanding. This was not her fault. After all, with her status as a countess, she usually only saw the stronger Bolvar. She didn't realize that after killing so many demon lords and harvesting so many spoils of war, the experts of the Alliance and the Horde had long since changed their equipment. Each of them was wearing extremely luxurious equipment in this era. These big shots of the Alliance definitely had the ability to kill her on the spot. What made her even more disappointed was that Duque still hadn't sent in all his experts. There were only 20 people fighting. They were divided into 4 groups of 5 and surrounded her from all 4 directions. Including Dooku, there were a total of 2 teams that stood further away. What a vigorous life force. Mograine, who was in charge of support and had yet to step forward, exclaimed. Dooku pursed his lips. Isn't that so? I took the opportunity to stab her in the chest, but only took away 20% of her life force. Dragons are indeed a combat race specially created by the Titans of creation. In Dooku's vision, the battle had only started for slightly more than a minute, and the system indicated that Onyxia's life force was only left with 67%. William, who was now Lagash, came over with the 2 one-handed swords that Jaina had given him. Lord Marcus, when do I go up? Dooku looked at the berserk version of William, who still had partial memory loss. When she flies into the sky, it'll be your turn. Dooku turned to everyone and shouted, be careful of her, deep breath, in the sky. On the other side, Onyxia was stunned when she heard this. Deep breath? Am I using my full dragon breath? How does he know that I want to fly into the sky to take care of them? Is Dooku really omniscient and prophetic like the rumors say? Onyxia suddenly felt a chill in her heart. If that's really the case, what's the point of fighting? The next moment she changed her mind. She was indignant. Really indignant. She had planned for so long and almost destroyed Stormwind from the inside, but Dooku's return ruined her plan? Even if she was facing the strongest forces of the Alliance and the Horde. Onyxia gritted her teeth in pain and suddenly flapped her wings, allowing the unique magic of the dragon race to be infused into her back and wings. Her huge figure suddenly rushed into the sky. Oh no! The cage can't stop her. Brawl Bearskin exclaimed subconsciously. However, in the next moment he was shocked to find that the powerful figures around him did not react. Even the frivolous Gavin Rad was in the mood to whistle, as if he was waiting to watch a show. Watch a show. Watch what show? The Black Dragon Princess is about to escape. On the other side, after the Black Dragon Princess crashed into the hemispherical magic formation of Lover's Island, she roared, repent. Mortals, I will burn you to ashes in the sky. She thought that she would see the mortal heroes panicking. After all, what followed next was her ultimate move. But the powerful figures of the mortals still did not react. They scattered on the ground in 2s and 3s, looking up at her emotionlessly. Stupid people. They don't know how terrifying I am. Onyxia was furious. Then she puffed up her chest and took a deep breath. Oh no. Isn't this the deep breath that Dooku mentioned? Valilla was a little shocked. Master Marcus also said that the first deep breath doesn't have to be dodged. Vanessa waved the pair of high-tier epic-grade daggers that Valilla was extremely envious of. But, just as Brawl, Valilla and William were panicking, Dooku shouted in his heart, Debt collector beats people. Dooku immediately received a response. Everyone knew why there was no need to dodge the first time. An angry but majestic female voice suddenly came from the sky. Dooku. You bastard, didn't I say that I'm busy? Onyxia's dragon face suddenly turned deathly pale. It was not just her. Everyone could tell who the female voice was. It was the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Dooku spread his hands. But Onyxia can fly. We can't do anything about it. Oomph. Give me half a ton of Häagen-Dazs later. 50 kilograms? Forget it if you don't want it. Dooku shamelessly bargained with the Red Dragon Queen in front of the Black Dragon Princess. In the next second, without even bargaining, a translucent red claw the size of half a football field suddenly appeared in the sky above Onyxia's back. Deep breath? *CKU. The poor Black Dragon Princess was slapped back to the ground by the claw. Chapter 11:21. This was cheating and breaking the rules. Why would the dragon aspect take action personally? This was like an adult beating up a baby. Didn't they say that the ultimate experts wouldn't make a move? Even if it was just one hit. But it was enough to be fatal. And yet, a meal of ice cream, Onyxia was overwhelmed with grief. She was as sad and indignant as she could be. She had eaten ice cream before and it was indeed good stuff. She heard that it was also invented by that damn Dooku. But she, the Black Dragon Queen, had betrayed her with just 100 pounds of ice cream. She couldn't accept this result. She was already in a bad situation. Facing an opponent who was a higher level than her, she had no way of fighting back. Onyxia hadn't even flown more than 150 feet before she was slapped back to the ground by the Red Dragon Queen. Onyxia was miserable. Like a cannonball, she crashed back into the Crystal Island. The uneven crystals on the ground stabbed her again. What was even worse was that the dragon breath she had gathered with all her might had exploded in her lungs. Even though a dragon's lungs could store fire, it was still very damaging. Flames that could be sprayed out through the neck, mouth and nose were few. Most of the high-temperature flames rushed into the bronchi and crashed into the alveoli. Needless to say, internal injury. This was definitely a very serious internal injury. At first, Onyxia thought that her head was dizzy from the sudden impact with the ground, but she soon realized that it was worse than that. She couldn't breathe. She didn't have enough anatomical knowledge. If she did, she would know that the flames that couldn't reach the alveoli had burned a lot of her alveolar tissues. This directly affected the air that passed through the alveoli and injected oxygen into the blood vessels. On the ground, Duque was a little stunned. He had expected that deep breath would be interrupted, but he didn't think it would be so powerful. Alexstrasza's slap at the critical moment had taken a third of Onyxia's HP. Now, according to the game, they had entered the third stage. Originally, there would be a very disgusting group fear in the third stage. This time, it definitely wouldn't happen. The ability to spew lava from the ground was a skill that only appeared in Onyxia's lair in the Dust Wallow Swamp. In order to avoid being caught in a chaotic situation, Duke specifically decided to fight in the shallow waters of the Mirror Lake. He didn't want to have to deal with it. At this moment, it seemed that the battle had caused considerable damage. However, this was originally a lake, and the damage to the bottom of the lake was only about a meter deep. It could be said that Duque had used his strategy to minimize the damage. Duque's face turned cold. Teams 3 to 6, attack with all your might. Teams 1 and 2, be on high alert. Onyxia struggled with all her might, but all her movements seemed more like a deathbed struggle. The mortal experts around her, except for a few who could withstand her attacks, were like butterflies fluttering through flowers, nimbly avoiding all of her movements. He continued to widen the wounds on her body, continuing to cause the bleeding effect. It had been 21 years since the Dark Portal opened. Many combat skills that were supposed to be developed in the future had already been developed in advance due to a certain transmigrator's reminder. For example, the usage cycle of Fury. Now, as long as the warrior profession stood firmly on the ground, they could greatly increase their muscle strength through Fury. Coupled with equipment that could strengthen the Fury circuit, that was similar to a magic circuit, ordinary warriors could often unleash a destructive power that was measured in tons. This was also why after reaching a high level in the realm of heroes, heroes could rely on their own strength to fight a giant dragon. Of course, like Old Bull Kane, Taurens were born with high strength. With a high starting point, they became even more insane after the bonuses. Everyone could see that Onyxia was at the end of her tether. The Alliance and Horde experts were like a noose, tightening around the Black Dragon Princess' neck. Soon she would be unable to breathe and lying on the ground. It was at times like this that the heroes were even more focused. Which expert didn't have a few trump cards? Standing beside Duque, Mograine, Jaina, Tyrant, and Grum all gripped their weapons nervously. Suddenly Duque turned around. What? A frostfire arrow, the size of a carriage, shot towards the void in the west. There was clearly nothing there a second ago. However, Duque's attack created ripples that looked like water. This mysterious spatial undulation spread perpendicular to the ground. Without any hesitation, Krasis, the commander of the Dalajan wizards who had been waiting at the side, gave the order to attack. With Morningstar wizards as the main force, 2 teams of 300 elite wizards immediately followed Duque's instructions and activated war magic. This was a large-scale magic formation with the purpose of war. With the support of a large number of magic gems in the magic formation, the mana of an individual would be increased to a rather terrifying level. It was equivalent to the attack of 50 Radiant Moon wizards. The torrential rain of arcane missiles suddenly poured into the void. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Accompanied by a strange sound, something revealed its true appearance from the void. At first glance, it seemed to be a red mountain peak, as if the Redridge mountain that was thousands of miles away had suddenly arrived at the edge of Stormwind City. Upon closer inspection, it was not a mountain, but an incomparably huge eyeball that was supported by pink biological tissue. Strange. Mysterious. It was overflowing with an evil aura. The purple eyeball with the disgusting yellow color of feces was clearly just an illusion. But when its surging evil will spread out, everyone smelled a nauseating stench. Their stomachs felt like they were being turned upside down, and they wanted to vomit out the dinner they had last night along with their own organs in one go. In the next second, octopus-like tentacles that were at least 1 or 2 stories tall suddenly appeared in the middle of each team, violently lashing out at each of the mortal heroes. The tight formation was immediately thrown into disarray. "Damn it! What is this?" Gavin Rat cursed. Duque, who was being stared at by the huge eyeball, finally muttered a forbidden name. "Ancient god. See, Thun." Although he knew that Onyxia had some sort of backup plan, no matter how wild Duque's imagination was, he would never have thought that an ancient god would personally take action. Without giving them time to react, a huge cluster of red light suddenly shot out from the swelling and changing color of the eyeball. F***CK, this time it was Duque's turn to curse. This was the kinetic ray of death that players least wanted to see. In the game, this was definitely something that would kill anyone who touched it. Duque did not dare to imagine what would happen to the crowd if they were hit by such a powerful ray cannon. Chapter 11:22. Ajax. Duque shouted. The magic circuit in his body spun 100 times faster than usual. The accumulated magic in his body, the magic drawn from the elemental plane, gathered in the void. This was a so-called magic that a transmigrator had secretly learned from another world. At the Breaking Dawn level, many magic only differed in the way energy was molded. Everyone could see that just as the red ray of light shot from the gigantic eyeball was about to hit the area around Onyxia, a gorgeous hexagonal ice crystal shield appeared diagonally in front of the crowd, blocking the red ray of light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A total of 7 layers of magic light shields blocked the attack at a 45-degree angle. There was no pause at all. The first 5 layers of the light shield, which was condensed with highly concentrated magic, were easily shattered in less than 1/100th of a second. The 6th layer lasted for a full 1/3 of a second before it cried out and fell. This gave the heroes precious time to react. The knights were invincible, the mages used ice, and the thieves raised the shadow cloak that could resist magic attacks. The other professions could only pray for the best. The most crucial 7th layer had a special texture that was different from the previous layers. It was very bright and it felt like a mirror. This layer of magic shield had done its job. In the end, most of the attacks from the mysterious giant monster were reflected. From the path it came from to the angle, there was a very obvious angle. The red light that was refracted beautifully dispersed into countless light beams that were as thick as a human's leg, splashing into the lush elven forest. Rumble, countless trees were instantly turned into charcoal. Even the West Spring stronghold, which was 3 kilometers away, was hit. The top of the 50-meter-tall white stronghold was directly cut off by a third by the largest red light beam. One must know that the West Spring stronghold had been reinforced and had an extraordinary magic protection circle for 24 hours. Even so, it was still unable to resist. The light of the magic protection circle merely flashed, and the top of the tower was directly blown off. Everyone suddenly realized that if it wasn't for Duque, perhaps they would have all died in that attack. But this was not the end. Most of the red rays were refracted, but a small portion of the scattered scorching rays hit the heroes surrounding Onyxia. Boulang's back was burned and he lay flat on the ground. The weapon in Edwin Van Cleef's right hand melted away, and his fingers seemed to have been injured. He temporarily lost his ability to fight. Gina Goldsword's right thigh was pierced, and a bloody hole the size of a baby's fist appeared. She screamed and fell to the ground. Brawl Bearskin was grazed in the stomach and Valera dragged him behind as he fell. Turayan activated his invincibility and blocked the attack with his divine sword. He was fine, but the bright holy light on his body dimmed by at least half. What Duque was most worried about finally happened. Onyxia seized the rare opportunity and rushed out in one breath. "Don't let her get away," Duque shouted as he flashed forward. Naturally, there were also the 2 teams of experts who had not made a move from the beginning to the end. Mograine directly slashed, and holy light gathered on Ashbringer. In an instant, a huge crescent arc with a diameter of 10 meters appeared, and it directly cut the Black Dragon Princess' left hind leg. Master Roar's famous leap slash was here again. According to the rumors, Master Roar had reached a terrifying level where every time he jumped, an Abyss Lord would definitely kneel. Of course, this rumor was not far from the truth. Bloodhowl drew a beautiful arc of light in the air, and dragon blood splattered everywhere as the axe fell. The Black Dragon Princess almost lost a claw, and her entire left claw was cut in half. She screamed in pain and her whole body flew out without a care. A figure leaped high and like a meteor he attacked the Black Dragon Princess who was trying to get up. Yes. He was one of the clones of the Stormwind King Varian Rin who had lost his memory, the violent and powerful Lagash. In his hands, the two swords formed a cross, and he ruthlessly slashed at Onyxia's neck. That is. Alicia was a little stunned. I gave it to him. It was Jaina who spoke. The weapons in Varian's hands were once wielded by a pair of night elf brothers, Valilian and Levelian. These two magical elven swords were called Shaladar and Aramin, which meant Shadow Ripper and Shadow Plunderer in Darnassus. In the Battle of Mount Hyjal, these two brothers died in battle, and the two swords were once taken by a demon. After that, Jaina killed that powerful demon. With Tyron's nod, the two swords became Jaina's spoils of war. When Varian rushed to Theramore, Jaina gave the two swords to Varian as a gift to his childhood friend. Now the two swords shone brilliantly in Varian's hands. The incomparably accurate slash directly cut a huge cross on Onyxia's back and neck. That was a slash that even broke a small part of the bone. If she wasn't a real demigod dragon, she would have been decapitated by now. Roar, another scream. Onyxia couldn't hold it in anymore. She finally couldn't help but use her last life-saving move. Wah! A shrill sound wave suddenly spread for a few kilometers around Mirror Lake. This wasn't an ordinary sound wave attack. This was a sound wave attack that contained the power of another ancient god, Enzos. This was almost a replica of Enzatha's attempt to save Nisario back then. Although it was much weaker, the target was no longer the four dragon kings, but mortals. The shrill sound passed through all defenses, ignored armor, holy light, and elemental power, and directly entered the minds of the heroes. The heads of the mortals who were slightly closer, whether they were mages or ordinary knights, exploded like watermelons. This kind of soul explosion directly hit their minds. Even people with strong wills like Theon and Sidan couldn't help but cover their heads and kneel on the ground in pain. Even Duque, who had the strongest mental defense, was shocked to find that 6 out of the 7 mental defense barriers he had set up in advance had been broken, and the last barrier was also on the verge of collapse, shaking like waves. Onyxia finally flew, not just by relying on her tattered wings, but also the dragon language magic that had the ability to float. Before she flew up, she turned back and gave Duque a fierce look. She hated him. She deeply imprinted this human man who had almost tricked her to death in the depths of her soul. That's right, she really wanted to turn around and bite Duque to death. But she didn't dare. Chapter 11:23. She realized that Duque was not affected as much as she thought. Looking at his reaction, he would probably return to normal in a few seconds. Perhaps she could bite Duque to death, but that would ruin her last chance to escape. Without hesitation, Onyxia flew across the treetops and flew towards the southeast. She did not dare to go north because she could clearly feel the life of her servants fading away in the north of Stormwind City. Even if there were not many powerful mortals there, it would be unwise to pass through a heavily guarded city in such a state. It was the same for the West Spring Fortress in the southwest. She did not dare to bet on whether Duque had arranged a large number of troops there. She could only go south. She flapped her wings with all her might and rushed out. Unfortunately, other than those powerful mortals, there were still a large number of griffins in the sky. From the beginning, the griffins did not approach her. When Kudrin realized that Onyxia was still trying to escape, more than 500 griffins began to surround her from all directions. Enzoth! Help me! Onyxia screamed in the draconic language. The mysterious ancient god replied faintly, "This is the last time, little one. If you still do not have the ability to escape, I will give up on my investment in you." In the next second, the griffins that filled the sky suddenly lost control. As if they saw the most terrifying thing, they ignored the calls of their masters, the dwarven knights, and flapped their wings and fled in all directions. No, no. Come back, Scarlet. Come back. Kudrin painfully realized that even his griffin king had lost control. Taking advantage of this last chance, Onyxia finally rushed out of the encirclement. The holy knights with the shortest legs were the first to fall behind, followed by the warriors, and then the rogues who had used up their sprint. When even the rangers who were relatively fast found out that Onyxia's huge body was beyond the range of their arrows, only Pharaoh could catch up to the Black Dragon Princess. "Chase!" Duque shouted. Other than the injured Gina Goldsword, all the Radiant Moon mages and above chased after her at high speed. The dragon was fast, but the mages who used Flash to travel were not any slower than the Black Dragon Princess. In the gap between each blink, they could instantly launch a large number of spells at the princess, causing her even more serious injuries. However, when he saw Onyxia's HP remaining at 5%, Duque's heart bled. Oh my god. Now he was letting this bastard go. Stormwind will not have peace. However, if she kept running away, they wouldn't be able to properly deal damage to her. The thing that he was most worried about had happened. The mages behind Duque began to fall behind helplessly. Normally, a mage's flash could not be used limitlessly. Only Radiant Moon mages and above could slightly eliminate the effects of a chaotic magic circuit. Flash was also a standard teleportation. It had to have a clear destination to teleport to, then use arcane energy to connect to the destination, temporarily turn its body into elements, and then quickly teleport to the destination. Not only did it require a mage's mana control, but it also required a mage's spatial positioning ability. If they made a mistake, they could teleport their body into a tree or rock, and even the strongest mage would die. Not every pharaoh could have a system elf like Duque to use spatial positioning. It was better in the open plains, but once they entered the elven forest, mages like Solarian were the first to fall behind. Then Jaina, when they reached the Twilight Forest, even Ronan was left behind. Only Duque chased after the Black Dragon Princess, relentlessly repeating the process of flash, instant magic bombardment, and flash, again. Duque, give up. You can't catch me. Onyxia shouted in midair. Duque felt like he was in a trance. He didn't think that a dragon's vitality would be so abnormal. Perhaps she used some secret technique, but according to the system elf's judgment, the Black Dragon Princess HP was slowly recovering. And she had intentionally recovered her wings first. Although she couldn't fly high, she was still in the Air Force. Duque couldn't fly, so he was at a disadvantage. Ah, you can't catch me. I'll escape and then I'll keep raiding your territory. I'll burn your beloved subjects, your beloved women to ashes. Duque didn't say a word and shot a dozen frostfire arrows. Unfortunately, he only hit twice and the princess cried out in pain. Just like that, Onyxia continued to flee in the sky, cursing as she ran, while Duque continued to chase after her until he reached a certain place. Suddenly, Duque stopped and stopped using flash. The furious Black Dragon Princess was no longer in a hurry to escape. Although she was covered in wounds and couldn't hold on much longer, the ecstasy of escaping made her so excited that she couldn't control herself. Ah, can't play anymore? Can't fight anymore? Or are you finally going to give up? Duke Marcus, I told you you can't catch me. Just you wait, I'll soon recover from my injuries, and then I'll launch the most horrifying and tragic revenge on you and your damn country. Duque was silent for a full 3 seconds before he suddenly raised his head 45 degrees. He had a mocking smile on his lips. Ah, ha ha. The shrill laughter pierced her heart like a sharp arrow, causing her heart to hurt even more. A dragon's heart was huge and powerful. Duque's sneak attack directly pierced through one of her ventricles. If she wasn't a dragon that had stepped into the demigod realm, she would have died a long time ago. She hated it. So, Duque's laughter deeply provoked her. What are you laughing at? Nothing. I'm laughing at your ignorance and stupidity. What dash? The princess roared angrily. I've always dreamed of luring you here. Although I always thought that I wouldn't have the chance, who knew that you would come here yourself? Onyxia suddenly had a bad premonition. She suddenly turned her head. Although there was a mountain separating her from the place where the energy was converging, she could still clearly feel that there was a ridiculously huge amount of magic power gathering not far away from her. Little female dragon, when you go to hell, if anyone asks how you died, don't forget to tell them, you died of stupidity. This is already the territory of Karazhan. The blood drained from Onyxia's dragon face. Careless. She was really careless. She didn't dare to run to Stormwind City in the north, and she also avoided the West Spring stronghold in the southwest. In the end, in her panic, she was unintentionally or unintentionally chased by Duque from the northwest, so she subconsciously ran southeast. In the end, she ran headfirst into the range of the scariest wizard tower in the world, and it was even Duque's wizard tower. There was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead, you barged into hell. Die, Onyxia. Chapter 11:24. The dark night was suddenly split open by a strong flash of light. A bolt of lightning as thick as a river descended from the sky and gathered at the top of the wizard tower that reached into the clouds. Then it shot out again, traversing 1,600 meters of empty space, exploding the peak of a small mountain, and finally blasted Onyxia, who was hovering in midair without any deviation. Ah! The Black Dragon Princess scream was so King melodious. It was clearly a scream, but Duque's bones softened when he heard it. There was no reason. It was for the indescribable thrill of a first kill. This was not a boss in the game that could only hide in dungeons for players to attack or be attacked. This was a powerful existence in the realm of demigods. Although Onyxia could only be considered the weakest in the realm of demigods, she was too famous. Back in the days, many high-difficulty dungeons relied on the time-limited bonus brought by the Black Dragon Princess's head. And how many players farmed her for countless days and nights for the sake of that, Onyxia's reigns? To ride on a smaller version of the Black Dragon Princess as a mount. Sigh. Tears welled up just thinking about it. There was no other way now. Letting the dragon return to the mountains was a million times scarier than letting the tiger return to the mountains. He could only kill her. Duque stared at the sky, watching the Black Dragon Princess's huge body fall from the sky and land on the ground. This was already near the Mistmantle Manor near the Twilight Forest's night town. When the Black Dragon Princess fell diagonally, she crashed into an abandoned wooden house. The walls and pillars of the wooden house were completely torn apart after a sharp crash. The bricks and wooden boards, dust and pillars all broke and then exploded, turning into dust and debris that splattered outwards. In an instant, half of the manor had become ruins and smoke and dust filled the air. Duque rushed over at high speed and something unexpected happened. When he approached with his magic shield and ice barrier activated, he suddenly heard what should have been a long-lost murmur. This sound passed through his eardrums and echoed directly in Duque's spirit sea. Do you have a girlfriend? When are you getting married? When are you going to have kids? Wait, this is the murmur of the ancient gods? Didn't that bastard Enzos claim to have given up on saving Onyxia? Before Duque could react, the whisper suddenly changed. It really is you. Although I don't know how you transmigrated 10,000 years ago, do you think that the little trick you played with me 10,000 years ago will still be effective 10,000 years later? This was clearly Enzo's voice. The declaration made by this voice gave Duque a very bad feeling. Not good. Not good. Not good, that's right. The imaginary mental barrier I created with the system 10,000 years ago resisted Nzatha's whispers. How could someone like Enzos not do anything for 10,000 years? Nothing improved? As if confirming Duque's ominous premonition, in the next moment, Duque's spiritual sea was suddenly injured. In the illusory spiritual world, an enormous pillar that seemed to be able to pierce through the heavens and the earth crashed into it. Then he ignored all the order and rules that Duque had constructed in his spiritual world and directly messed up everything. It was more violent than an earthquake, more shocking than a tsunami, more despairing than the collapse of the sky. Not only Duque's spiritual world, even the system elf crashed in that instant. In the real world, Duque felt as if he was struck by lightning. His whole body was rooted to the ground. Not to mention using magic, he couldn't even move his pinky. At this moment, a violent whirlwind suddenly swept up in the dust. A giant black beast used its remaining claw and leg to struggle and pounced over. It opened its terrifying scarlet mouth full of crisscrossed fangs at Duque. The world suddenly became silent. Everything was light and fluttering. Duque, who came back to his senses, saw the world in front of him turn black and white, and finally came to a realization. *CK. I'm dead? I'm actually dead? This doesn't make sense. This is impossible. If there's no reason for this, it would be strange. Duque realized that he had died for a long time. It had been so long that he almost forgot that he could still die. The horrifying pain of his body being torn apart still lingered on his soul. Duque suddenly shivered. It couldn't be helped. Being torn apart by an enraged black dragon was definitely not a pleasant experience. This made Duque think of his first death in the Elven Forest 20 years ago. Damn, wasn't the one who killed him a wild boar named Prince? Now that he had transmigrated 20 years ago, he was given a princess. This was really... The sudden sound of the system notification sounded. Duque was really surprised and happy. He was happy that the system had recovered. He was surprised that the system notification said, "Warning. Warning. Host, your body is being destroyed at a high speed. The will of the evil god Enzoth is eroding your body and the remnant soul on it. Your soul energy and human nature are decreasing at a rate of 3% per second. Do you want to resurrect?" Nonsense. Of course resurrect. Duque couldn't make it to the corpse in time. In the time it took to run to the corpse, he lost even more moral integrity. A moment ago in the abandoned manor, the Black Dragon Princess was laughing maniacally as she tore Duque's corpse. Blood, intestines, pieces of minced meat, and Duque's head that had died with a grievance. "Ha! You're dead. Dead. Let you plot against me? Let you ambush me? Let you destroy the plan that I spent so much time on? Let you gather so many strong people to injure me all over? Ah! What is retribution? This is retribution. Justice will eventually be defeated by evil. Just as Onyxia was venting her anger to her heart's content, a sudden change occurred. All of Duque's body parts, broken limbs, and even blood disappeared in an instant. They turned into streams of light and gathered behind her. Onyxia felt as if a giant had grabbed her long dragon neck. Her maniacal laughter stopped abruptly. She twisted her neck that was like a rusty machine and slowly turned her head. An energy giant that was as tall as a 5-story building was standing behind her. She could tell at a glance that the core of the energy giant was Duke Marcus, who should have been killed and dismembered by her just now. But the state of the energy giant caused her heart to fall into the darkest hell of ice. That was definitely not a normal elemental giant. Because no elemental giant in the world would be like this guy in front of her. The left half was the brightest holy light, and the right half was the darkest darkness. Light and darkness were separated by the middle of the body. They were not connected, but there was no conflict. Onyxia was stunned. But Duque's current state was also a mess. Warning. Warning. Due to the soul being partially contaminated, the 7 major sins have been triggered. Pride, gluttony, lust, wrath, envy. That was the system's warning. Calm down, think about it. What are the 3 major virtues? That was Alonso's failed soul whispering. Chapter 11:25. At this moment, the chaos in Stormwind City had subsided. Most of the conservative nobles had been arrested. What was even more unexpected was that Elune had descended upon them. Tyron stood at the top of Stormwind Fortress and summoned Elune's power. The goddess' gigantic shadow floated in the Valentine's Day sky, healing the injured citizens with her gentle moonlight. No, even many people who were thought to be dead were forcibly pulled back from the edge of hell by the goddess's unparalleled divine arts. In an instant, the name of Elune rose to fame in this country that was previously dominated by the Church of Holy Light. They did not receive news from Duque, but Ronan, who had returned dejectedly, came instead. Where's Duque? Jaina and the rest hurriedly surrounded him. I don't know. I couldn't catch up to them when we neared the Twilight Forest. Actually, it was not Ronan's fault. Other than the most developed areas along the railway, most of the forest was still uninhabited. For example, the abandoned manor in Mistermantle might seem close to the night town on the map. In reality, it was 30 kilometers away in a straight line. In a place as dark as the Twilight Forest, the night watchman of the night town would need at least 5 to 6 hours to rush over. In the manor, only Onyxia and Duque were left. No, it should be said that there was also a terrible will of the ancient god. Impossible. You're already dead. And Zathas will said with certainty. At the same time, it launched another attack on Duque's mind. Ah, is that so? Duque smiled, but it was a very strange smile. On the left side of his face that was shrouded in darkness, there was a sinister smile on the left corner of his mouth. On the right side that was filled with light, the smile made one feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. One smile, 2 different interpretations. Even Onyxia, a dragon who had lived for so long, felt a chill in her heart when she saw this kind of oddity. Enzos launched his attack. He didn't expect that he would be able to smash into Duke's spiritual sea like a battering ram the last time in a domineering manner. This time it wouldn't work. The huge spiritual attack was like a muddy pond, and did not cause any ripples. Stupid dragon. Run. I was relying on you to launch an attack on his soul. As long as you don't die, I can find a chance to deal with this brat. After Mystic instructed the Black Dragon Princess, Enzo shouted, "You must have a weakness." At this moment, Duque's mind was in chaos. However, the words "humanity reduced by 40% on his retina deeply stimulated Duque's nerves. He was very angry and wanted to vent the depression in his heart. Unknowingly, he had already made a counterattack. Ah, so you like to use whispers to hypnotize people into psychosis? Great. Come on, hurt each other. Let's see who becomes mentally ill first. Faced with Enzo's mental message, Duque immediately replied back. What is this? Enzos exclaimed. In theory, these things should be memories and soul fragments. When they were transmitted back to Enzos through the mental channel, Enzos was dumbfounded. In this world, there was definitely no one who had seen what a cartoon was, and no one who had seen what a happy goat and big wolf was, or what a tragic villain was, or what a weakling was. Enzo suddenly realized that while he was trying to disturb Duque, he was also being disturbed. He suddenly turned into a big gray wolf, and every time he wanted to catch sheep to eat, there would be a tragedy. No. This is not me. He turned into a monster and was killed by the galactic fleet. No. This is not me either. However, when a memory hidden in the deepest part of his heart was dug out, Enzos finally realized that the other party was also using inhuman methods to crazily collect all of his memories, and then quickly condense an illusion that was more realistic and more in line with his memories. Enzo saw his past. It was the ancient era when the Titans descended. They used unparalleled power to destroy everything of their ancient gods. Their people, their territory, their bodies, and then cruelly suppressed them. Enzos tried to resist but was suppressed again and again. The pain of the past kept resurfacing. What kind of power is this? Not only that, the list of evil god believers buried in the shallow layer of his consciousness was ruthlessly dug out. One by one the names leaked out. No. This can't be a human's method? Enzos was really shocked this time. He was scared. He was really scared. He cut off all connections with Onyxia as if he was avoiding the plague, and even destroyed all the secret methods he had hidden in the Black Dragon Princess soul. This was because he was afraid that Duque would follow his soul imprint and track his true location. A few seconds later, when Enzo's power retreated from Onyxia's body like a tide, the Black Dragon Princess was in trouble. She was already on the verge of death from her injuries, and the last attack to kill Duque had used up almost all of her strength. Now that she saw that Duque had actually defeated Enzos in the domain of consciousness, she was scared out of her wits. Her huge body staggered and she could barely move. Her survival instinct was still urging her to escape from this man who was unknown whether he was a god or a demon. At this moment, Duque's consciousness was a little unclear, and he almost instinctively chased after Onyxia. This was because the system clearly indicated that Onyxia still had 40% of his soul in her body. It is strongly not recommended to kill the Black Dragon Princess. The part of your soul that was separated due to your death is already quite unstable. Once Onyxia, who is the carrier, dies, there is a high chance that the part of your soul will dissipate along with her soul. What the heck? I can't kill her. What else can I do? I strongly recommend activating taming mode. Activate it. Do it the fastest way. I'll leave it to you. Duque didn't feel good, and a large amount of negative emotions interfered with his brain. Once the 7 sins were activated, they wouldn't stop until they were vented. Even with Alun's blessing, he couldn't withstand it. Duque tried his best to maintain his consciousness, but he couldn't do it. His body seemed to be doing something that had nothing to do with him. No, don't come over. Onyxia screamed, but she didn't manage to take 2 steps before the giant of light and darkness pounced on her, pressing her head with one hand and choking her neck with the other. Its huge mouth bit on the wound that Varian had slashed on her neck, and it sucked her blood crazily. The premonition of death suddenly came crashing down on her head. She no longer had the strength to break free. At this moment, she made a decision that she didn't know if it was smart or stupid. She actually used the last of her strength to transform into a human form. But this time she was pressed down again as she staggered to escape. But this time it wasn't the energy giant, but Duque himself. Chapter 11:26. Before death, many things would flash through his mind like a flashing lantern. Onyxia really regretted it. After her father, Nisario, knelt down, she even specially improved the dragon race's ultimate transformation spell. At the risk of being discovered, she could give herself a stronger defense in her human form. So what? She was still discovered, and her chest was still pierced by a sword. Transforming into a dragon was still tolerable, but transforming back into a human form made her entire body hurt. However, she no longer had any stamina or magic power, so she could only maintain the lowest physiological consumption in her human form. She only had one last trump card left. She struggled and tried to get rid of Duque's big hand while screaming, "What's left in my body is your soul, right? Let me go or I'll destroy this part of your soul." What a coincidence. If it's a trump card, I have one too. A sinister smile appeared on one side of Duque's face. The next moment, a deeper sense of weakness spread throughout Onyxia's body. This is the soul of a demon? To be precise, this is 1/5 of the dragon's soul, and it's only for the black dragons. Stupid female dragon, did you only realize now that your power has weakened? As Duque laughed, he tied a necklace made of what could be called the black dragon's soul around the neck of the black dragon princess. Ah! Onyxia let out a scream. That was not a physical pain, but a punishment from the soul that originated from a more fundamental source. She lost the last bit of strength to resist and gasped for breath. Am I going to die? She found that her will had begun to fade. Die. Duque laughed. If it were at the beginning, I might have let you die. Since you've let me die for a long time, this isn't how I'll settle this score. Duque gently caressed the black dragon princess body with one hand that emitted holy light. Although she was a tenacious black dragon, she only had 1% of her HP left. If she did not receive treatment, she would still die from excessive bleeding. Under the influence of the holy light that was extremely dense, Onyxia could not help but let out a comfortable murmur. She was pleasantly surprised to find that her wounds were healing. Although most of them were superficial wounds, at least she wouldn't die for a while. Duque was afraid of losing his soul. This was an opportunity. Before she was ready to implement the wonderful idea that she thought she had, the nightmare came again. That was an even more terrifying soul torture. After an unknown amount of time, she finally calmed down. Lying on the dirty black soil, she panted heavily. The sweat on her back was so much that it even diluted the bloodstains on her body. At this moment, Onyxia, who had turned her head, saw that Duque's hands were equally strange. One held light and the other held darkness. The two opposing forces were calm and tamed in Duque's hands. The black palm pressed down again, and suddenly, an overwhelming pain surged from every corner of her body. It was so painful that she could not breathe, and her brain almost melted from the pain. In the next second, the golden palm caressed her back, and the pain from the invasion of the dark power instantly subsided. It even healed the wounds on her skin. Duke's voice rang out again. He spoke very slowly, even with a gentle and refined tone, but in her ears, it was no different from the death knell of hell. Onyxia, you attempted to overthrow the alliance, plotted against the Stormwind King Varian, and caused so many civilian casualties. Your sins cannot be washed away even with death. Now I'll give you a chance. Bulsh *T. I am the noble black dragon Queen Onyxia. You can hang my head on the city gates to show off your power. But don't expect me to yield. Give up, I will not yield even if I die 10,000 times. Onyxia scolded. Well said. Then you can die 10,000 times first. Duque's black palm pressed Onyxia's beautiful head into the mud. In the next moment, a dark impact similar to Mind Blast directly hit her spiritual world. She suddenly saw many unimaginable scenes. It was the reflection of her fighting in her lair in Dustwallow Swamp. Who was he? Who were they? Facing 40 strong mortals who were like wolves and tigers, she desperately resisted. She slapped with her claws, bit with her mouth, swept with her tail, and burned with her strongest dragon breath. But she lost. Again and again. She was defeated countless times, and her most precious treasure was stolen. Then she was skinned, and even her head was hung on the gates of Stormwind City. No. All of this was fake. The first few times she could still hypnotize herself. But that feeling was too real. Touch, taste, smell, all 5 senses. Then day after day, year after year of failure. The frustration and humiliation brought by endless failure accumulated in her heart again and again. Onyxia, who had once thought herself strong, began to lose confidence. She didn't know that this was someone's system genie. It started to render the video of countless players pushing down the Black Dragon Girl, reconstructing it into the most perfect 3D. Almost everyone was made of more than 100,000 facets, looking absolutely no different from the real thing. It even recorded her various movements in her dragon form and made a series of counterattacks and solo kills, giving her a deeper sense of defeat. 10,000 defeats caused the combat strength that she was most proud of to feel worthless. 10,000 mental attacks, but only 3 seconds passed in reality. When the mental attack was over, Onyxia's eyes were blank. Do I still have a future? Yes, of course. Your future is to put on the reins and become the exclusive mount of Sir Duque. Behind her, Duque laughed sinisterly. I have a deep grudge against you. Don't worry, I will definitely make up for the dreams that I didn't realize before. Not only will I ride you to Stormwind City for a ride, but I will also take you to Dragon Slumber Temple for a stroll. For some reason, Onyxia felt that this wasn't the real Duque. Some kind of dark power was affecting Duque, but she just had to bump into the muzzle of the gun. Hearing Duque declare that he wanted her to be his mount and let him ride her around the world in shame, not only showing off in front of mortals, but also becoming a laughing stock in front of her own dragon race. Onyxia wanted to die. No, I will never give in. She used the last of her stubbornness and stared fiercely at Duque. That's a good look. Come on. Change into a dragon and run for me. What, you don't want to? Fine, I can run in human form too. After saying that, Duque actually started to search. What can be used as a rein? I got it. It was a rubber ball with several holes in it and 2 ribbons tied to both sides of the ball. Chapter 11:27. Duque had a wonderful dream. He raced. He became the male lead in an action movie. However, this time he felt very good. He could clearly feel that he was holding the steering wheel with both hands. As long as he pressed the black horn in the middle of the steering wheel, the car would make a strange whimpering sound. It was very unique. Although it felt like he was driving a Ferrari, it was also a little like riding a motorcycle. Yes, it should be riding a motorcycle. The thrill brought by high-speed racing was unparalleled. As fast as lightning. It felt like he was practicing swordsmanship. Every jolt made him feel like he was about to be thrown off the motorcycle. Why does it feel like riding a horse? So bumpy. In his hazy vision, Duke seemed to see himself whipping a horse, a thick 9-tailed horsewhip, lashing at the horse's butt. All of a sudden, a strange sound was heard. Congratulations, Master. Onyxia has surrendered. She is beginning to return to the Master's soul. Your moral integrity is being topped up at 55%. 56%. As the value rose to 100%, Duque finally began to wake up. When he truly realized what was happening, he realized that something was wrong. Damn. What the hell is this? Why am I holding 2 dragon horns with both hands? Why are these 2 dragon horns on the head of Countess Katrana, who has transformed into a human? And then my dragon taming whip? Perhaps he lost control due to his excitement. After Duque woke up, he unintentionally gave Onyxia the final blow. Onyxia, whose mouth was stuffed with something, arched her back. She raised her head to the sky and let out a sorrowful cry. Then, as if she had lost all her strength, she lay on the ground in an oars position. Duque was terrified. He loosened his grip and the dragon horns slipped from his hand. At this time, Duque finally realized what he had done. Damn! I tamed a dragon? Sensitive to the changes in the dragon taming whip, Onyxia's eyes were filled with tears. She revealed a begging look that made Duque feel incredulous. Duque pulled her up and hurriedly removed the restraining tool from her mouth. Onyxia opened her mouth and said, Master, I give up. Don't torture me anymore. I'll be obedient in the future. Things seemed to have become a little complicated. Duque was dumbfounded. Logically speaking, since Onyxia had done so many bad things, she should have been killed 10,000 times. 10,000 times was not wrong. But now their relationship seemed to be subtly different. More importantly, the Black Dragon Princess's humiliating declaration caused her soul to change. In the spirit world's vision, Duque could clearly see that there was a rein in his right hand. This wasn't an ordinary rein. It was a soul rein made from Onyxia's soul. This was similar to how Sargeras made the demon lords hand over part of their souls and store them in the twisted nether. He wasn't boasting. Right now, as long as Duque willed it, he could make Onyxia suffer a fate worse than death. System notification. Congratulations, host, you have obtained the legendary item. True Onyxia's reins. That's right. Not those miniaturized copies of Onyxia that were only for players to fool around with. This was the real Black Dragon Princess's reins. Duque couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha! Ha ha! I'll let you farm it 100 times and it won't drop. Who asked you to be reserved? Who asked you to call me black? Now, I don't want those knockoffs, I have the real thing. That was resentment. Just like the undead horse that couldn't drop Rivendell countless times. Before Duque transmigrated, he couldn't get the Black Dragon Princess's reins no matter what. Once he did, a gay bastard called Recruit, and you, teamed up to steal his dragon. This resentment of the Black Hand even triggered the envy of the 7 deadly sins. Now that Duque's thoughts were clear, he felt refreshed. But Onyxia was in a tragedy. Onyxia shed tears of humiliation when she thought of the miserable life she would have to lead in the future. If it was an ordinary threat, she would definitely rather die than comply. However, it turned out that there was an existence even more terrifying than ghosts and gods. Duque. On one side was extreme pain and torture, and on the other side was the most gentle and comfortable holy light. Duque was simply the perfect combination of an angel and a devil. This kind of devastation was far greater than what her father had done to her mother. She remembered asking her mother, "Since you're so afraid of father, why did you give birth to me in Nefarian?" Sinestra replied, "A weak dragon that can't beat me down is not qualified to be my spouse. Although I'm reluctant, since Nethario has the ability to bite my neck and press my dragon head to the ground, I have the obligation to give birth to his children. This is the rule of the Black Dragon clan." Onyxia suddenly understood her mother's feelings. Perhaps this was what it meant to be conquered. However, she, the noble Black Dragon princess, was pressed down by a human. What the hell was this? Onyxia's mind was in a mess and she had no idea what to do. In the darkness in the distance, the light of torches began to appear. Duque realized that it should be the Night Watchman from Night Town. After he became the lord of the eastern part of the Twilight Forest, he had strengthened the organization of the Night Watchmen. Most of the Night Watchmen were veterans who had retired from the first and second battle of the Dark Portal. They were quite skilled. Duque didn't want to trouble them, so he directly projected a phantom and explained the situation to one of the Night Watchmen. Duque looked around and picked up Onyxia, whose clothes had long been torn into strips. He took out a spare mage robe from his storage bag, wrapped it around her and left. He couldn't go back to Stormwind City immediately. Duque wanted to open a magic transmission to tell Jaina and the others that he was safe, but looking at the trembling Onyxia, Duque suddenly felt a headache. Duque directly opened the portal to Karazhan. As soon as he came out of the portal, Duque saw a petrified ghost mage. Khadgar, alright, Duque had almost forgotten about his existence. Now it seemed that this guy was still very dutifully helping him take care of Karazhan. Wah, beloved master. Although I know you're very busy and don't have time to take care of your mage tower, you shouldn't give me such a big fright the moment you come back. Khadgar looked left and right at the trembling Onyxia, who was wrapped in the mage robe behind Duque, with an expression that said, "I understand." Duque's face was red and he gave the reins to Khadgar. "Find a place to hide her. Don't let her escape and don't believe anything she says. Other than the minimum amount of food and medical supplies, don't give her anything. Understood?" "Understood. If His Majesty Proudmoore asks, I'll tell him that you hid a dragon as an experiment material." Chapter 11:28. Karazhan was very big. Not to mention hiding a person, it would not be a problem to stuff half of the dragon's slumber temple inside. After a few turns, Duque brought Onyxia to the huge astrological hall that should have been where the Nether Dragon was. "You stay here." "Wait." Without giving the princess of the Black Dragon a chance to argue, Duque stuffed her in and quickly put the most powerful compound seal on the space to prevent her from escaping and to prevent anything from coming into contact with her. Now Onyxia had finally given in. Submission was a far cry from obedience. Obedience was a far cry from deference and a far cry from complete loyalty. This wasn't a game and Duke couldn't see the loyalty. Moreover, the Black Dragon race's talent was in scheming. Duque did not dare to be careless at all. After quickly dealing with Onyxia, Duque finally dared to answer their magic messages. Duque, are you okay? If you're not dead, make a sound," Servana shouted nervously. In front of the magic mirror of the Storm Stronghold, the Alliance and Horde bigwigs who were concerned about Duque were all speechless. What the hell was this? It is indeed Duque. Jaina shrugged. "Duque, I'll deal with you when you come back." Queen Sylvanas was a little mad. In the mirror, Duque looked wronged. "You told me to make a sound if I'm not dead." "You're in the right." On the surface, she looked angry, but everyone could hear the surprise in her voice. Soon, Duque opened a portal and returned. "What's the situation? Did you let her escape?" Bolvar was the most nervous and the first to rush up to ask. It was not just him. All the bigwigs in the Storm Stronghold were extremely concerned. Many of them had participated in the siege organized by Duque. Obviously, everyone knew that not every time would have a good ending. For example, the last time they ganged up on Arthas, he was forcibly rescued, leaving behind endless trouble in the future. Duque smiled. "Although I suffered a bit at the hands of Enzos, I didn't let you down." With that, Duque swung his arm and threw a sword that looked like a machete to Valera, who was nervously following behind Varian. She subconsciously grabbed the handle of the weapon and was a little confused. "This is..." Duque had a smile on his face. "Viscolo the Bloodletting? It's yours." Valilla examined the sword carefully, her face showing an expression of ecstasy. This was an era where epic equipment had yet to become commonplace. As a slave gladiator, Valera would normally be lucky to possess an excellent weapon. Now that she had obtained a relatively high-tiered epic weapon, it was definitely a pleasant surprise. Seeing his companion's ecstatic expression, William was a little dumbfounded. Valera, I remember that you don't specialize in combat, right? Shut up. From today onwards I'm a combat thief. Valera's scolding made William a little resentful. It was impossible to buy an exquisite weapon even if one wanted to. In the eyes of a powerhouse who was used to living a poor life, changing his fighting style for a weapon was a very normal thing. Vanessa, who was at the side, patted Valera's shoulder. Do you know the benefits of following my master? Do you want to jump ship and join the Marcus family? Valera quickly hid behind Varian and made a face at Vanessa. Seeing that Duque had begun to divide the spoils as usual, everyone's faces were filled with joy. The space bag Anixia's pouch was distributed, along with ring of imprisonment, death collar, to the powerhouses who had participated in the Battle of Mount Hygel. These items were all very valuable. But to the new powerhouses who had just joined for the first time, this was a feast to upgrade their equipment. Bolvar actually wanted to ask about the evil magic at first, but he understood after seeing Duque's expression. Reginald stood beside Bolvar. Although Duque has all kinds of small problems, he has never let us down when it comes to big things, hasn't he? Looking at this old friend who had worked with him for more than 10 years, Bolvar smiled. That's right. Even though one was a direct subordinate of the late King Lang, and the other was a vassal of Duque, they still became good friends just like in history. After dividing the spoils, it was time for the main event. William, please ask the other one to come out too. Let's meet everyone together and put an end to this conspiracy. Under Duque's command, the other William also came out. The two kings had exactly the same faces, but had completely different auras. Anyone would be shocked. Two kings? How is this possible? Either my eyes are deceiving me or the world is deceiving me. The nobles and officers discussed among themselves. In front of hundreds of nobles and high-ranking officers of the kingdom, Bolvar announced the cause of Valentine's Day. I'm sorry, this is all the doing of the evil black dragon Anixia, who disguised herself as the human Countess Katrana. As the Prince Regent, it is my dereliction of duty that I did not notice this. But before I'm held accountable, may I trouble the Regent, Duke Marcus, to cast a spell and restore His Majesty Rin. Duque walked forward and looked at the twin kings. He said seriously, back then you were hit by a very evil ancient magic. It directly split your souls. To be honest, it is very difficult and very painful to fuse your souls again. If you resist the fusion, there may be irreversible consequences. Have you thought it through? Yes. He is me and I am him. We are all William, and we are not complete without either one of us. As Rogosh, William had the most decisive personality, and his answer was the most resolute. I'm actually afraid. The timid William's answer made Duque frown. But his next words made Duque and the others feel relieved. But we all have the same love, our Tiffany, our child Anduin. In order not to cause trouble for them, I am willing to give up this lowly self and fuse again. After the timid William finished speaking, the bastard Duque's mind was tainted. All right, one husband turned into two, cough cough. Duque nodded and collected his thoughts. He began to cast a spell. This was the recovery spell that he knocked from Onyxia's hands. Long before she completely surrendered and was willing to become a mount, she had handed over the spell first. If it was a normal Breaking Dawn mage, he would not be able to do it. This was because it involved the repair and recasting of souls. Fortunately, after spending time in the Burning Legion, Du's ability to control souls was definitely the best among mortals. Chapter 1129. Duque softly chanted a draconic incantation. You are the same existence on the soul's scale. You have the same weight, the same texture. You come from the same source, the same mother. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of nobles, the two Varians stretched out their hands and held each other's fingers. Gradually, their entire bodies began to turn into specks of light and disintegrate. Then, the beautiful silver-white glow began to converge and form a human figure. From this moment onwards, the farce between the two kings ended. Varian Rin was once again the one and only king in the world. Varian, Queen Tiffany rushed forward, caressing her husband and scrutinizing every detail of his face. Tiffany had once worried herself to death about losing herself and being a yes-man. Now everything was fine. Her young and heroic husband had returned. The two of them became one, and Varian also regained his memories. At the same time, he also had the unforgettable memory of the ghost wolf Rogosh. He had many things to tell his lover, but in the end, thousands of words were stuck in his throat. All he could say were a few words, "I'm back." The king and queen of Stormwind passionately kissed each other in public. This, of course, won the cheers of the entire audience and the most enthusiastic applause. That's right. The backbone of Stormwind had returned. After the farce was over, Bolvar dropped a heavy bomb. Our most beloved king has been turned into a puppet by evil magic. The evil Countess Katrana and Risto took advantage of the situation and almost stole the power of the kingdom. No matter what, as the regent, I have failed in my duty. From today onwards, I resign from my position as regent and ask for punishment from His Majesty. For Dragon you. Varian was a little dumbfounded. Before Varian could continue speaking, Bolvar knelt on one knee and continued, Your Majesty. Merit must be rewarded and mistakes must be punished. This is the principle of a good king that cannot be shaken. Your Majesty, please confiscate all of my fiefs as an example. This move of Bolvar's was beyond everyone's expectations. In the next moment, everyone realized Bolvar's decisiveness. Think about it, the king had been split apart by magic, and Bolvar was merely guilty of not investigating, yet all of his territories had already been confiscated. What should be the punishment for those nobles who collaborated with Onyxia to force the abdication and persecuted Duque? The crime of treason was unavoidable. In that instant, Duque understood Bolvar's good intentions. Duque bowed and said, Duke for Dragon is right. Merit will be rewarded and mistakes will be investigated. I have the title of regent, but I haven't really assisted His Majesty for so many years. I have also failed in my duties. I ask His Majesty to allow me to resign as regent. Duke's action was a classic example of returning power. The abdication of the two regent kings at the same time meant that William, who had regained his sense of self, could finally show his power. At the same time, this was to wipe out all the pests and nobles and nail them to the pillar of shame. William turned around and said in a deep voice, I understand the efforts of the two regents. I thank the two Grand Dukes for their continued service to me and to Stormwind. I hope that the two of you can assist me in the future. I'm still young and there are many things I don't understand. Please do your best to teach me. As for those degenerates, as long as there is concrete evidence, I will definitely sentence them to death in the name of William Rynn. The wrath of the Emperor would result in millions of corpses. This was not an exaggeration. As the king, once he made the final decision on this matter, there was no room for maneuver. Tomorrow there would probably be a massacre. That had nothing to do with Duque anymore. Duque closed his eyes gently. Perhaps the 21st Valentine's Day of the Dark Portal would be named Bloody Valentine by future generations of historians. But so what? Stormwind had rotted, and surgery had to be performed to remove the rotten flesh. Only then would there be a chance of rebirth. Otherwise, if it continued to grow, no matter how lush the tree looked, it would only end up rotting internally and eventually collapse. It was late at night, and the impact on Stormwind and the entire Alliance and Horde had not ended. The aftermath would continue to ferment after daybreak. Duque did not care how far William could go. In a sense, this was also a test for William. If William failed, Duque would also re-examine his relationship with William, and even the entire Stormwind. Phew. After leaving the meeting hall of the Storm Fortress, Duque let out a long sigh. It's over for tonight. Just as he turned his head, he was shocked to find himself surrounded by a large group of women. Although they were all in battle attire, thanks to the Azeroth style, the Ranger's attire was just a three-point style with a cape and long boots. It was very pleasing to the eye. Duque swallowed his saliva. What's the matter? The surrounding outsiders had long been sent away. Queen Sylvie directly hugged Duque from behind. We don't want to discuss with you whether Onyxia is dead or not. We also don't want to care about the smell of Fatina on your body. We just want to remind you. The remaining 6 women said in unison, the night of Valentine's Day is not over yet. Duque's throat gurgled. Alright, you guys have the final say. Of course. Aurelia and Sasha directly held on to Duque from both sides. You said that for the safety of the king and the people, we had to use Valentine's Day to lure the princess of the Black Dragon out. We all listened to you. Now that it's over, it's time for you to fulfill your duty as a lover. Alright, the following story tells everyone to never underestimate the persistence and craziness of women for special holidays. Poor Duque was directly dragged away. Before he was engulfed by the vortex of passion, Duque looked up to the sky and shouted, I'm not afraid, I still have the blessings of the Red Dragon. The queen, the female general, and the priestess said in unison, hee hee. Just nice. Curtains, red candles, and a revolving bed. Countless Mount Hygel. The Mariana Trench that could never be filled. Whose scabbard was this? Whose killer weapon was this? Duque was completely dumbfounded. But he could not lose. If he lost, his path as a conqueror would end here. Although the land of gentleness could easily become the grave of a hero, Duque was still a little unwilling. The passion hidden under the priestess' holy face could not defeat Duque. The conqueror game made up of real queens could not stump Duque. Even the sisters well made up of 3 sisters could not defeat the great demon king Duque. The first glimmer of dawn appeared. Looking at the faint morning sun outside the Duke's mansion in Stormwind City, Duque struggled to climb out and swore in his heart, F***CKU. Why are there so many holidays? What Valentine's Day, Chinese Valentine's Day, 5/20/11, Hand Chopping Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and you still have to remember the anniversary of our acquaintance. Isn't it better to have holidays 365 days a year? How can people live like this? Those with girls hurt their kidneys and wallets. Those without girls still have to eat dog food on the streets. Nonsense. I, Duque, have decided that Azeroth can forget about these holidays in the future. Chapter 1130. Brother Duque, I won't be able to see you again for a long time. Can you leave a mark on me so that I can reminisce about you at night without you? Kalia begged Duque softly. No problem. Duque replied energetically. System Elf, host, I just detected a slight decrease in your humanity, moral integrity. Did something happen? Duque carried Kalia's white thigh and used 999 consecutive godly sword stab while replying resolutely, nothing. The Alliance and the Horde defeated the evil Black Dragon Princess Onyxia and saw through the conspiracy to overthrow the Alliance. They then punished the fallen nobles who were in cahoots with the evil. This result was worthy of celebration. William did not disappoint Duque. Not only did he execute most of the nobles who were in cahoots with Onyxia, but he also returned Duque's territory. Together with Bolvar and Duque, he reformulated the rights and duties of the nobles. He took back the right to station troops and tax, as well as prohibited the local nobles from privately passing local laws. All local laws had to be applied to Stormwind City first, and only after they were approved could they be implemented. While William was strengthening the royal authority, he also began to draft the Constitution of Stormwind. Not only did it have regulations for the people and nobles, it also started to restrict the unlimited extension of the royal authority. Drafting a constitution was not something that could be done in a day. It was just that in the new constitution, the concept of permanent autonomy for Duque's territory was formally proposed. Duque deliberated for a long time before deciding to agree. Historically, the territory that Stormwind controlled was not large. Nominally, the kingdom had 4 large territories: the Elven Forest, the Reedridge Mountains, the Twilight Forest, and the Western Wilderness. In reality, other than the Elven Forest, which was better controlled, the other territories were not stable. The Western Wilderness was the territory of the Defias Brotherhood. Outside the various farms were the territories of bandits, beasts, and murlocs. Now, after Duque's management, it had become 1,000 miles of fertile land. It was the core of the kingdom. After many years of management by the Marcus family, the Reedridge Mountains had become a private territory. At the same time, the surrounding gnolls and other messy forces had been wiped out. The Twilight Forest was no longer scary after the construction of the East-West Railway. All the ogres had been wiped out, especially the Vogger Ogre Mountain. It was now one of Stormwind's most important mines. Coupled with the recent expansion of Stranglethorn Vale, it was no exaggeration to say that the territory of the Stormwind Kingdom was much larger than it had been in history. So, even though East Elwyn Forest, East Twilight Forest, and Reedridge Mountain had become Duke's territory, the kingdom's territory was still huge. However, the most shocking thing was that William insisted on giving the Marcus family the title of King Candidate Family. William said, when Stormwind City fell 20 years ago, the late King Lang was already in despair. He had long made a vow in his heart that if anyone could help the Wurine family recover Stormwind City, he would not be ashamed to see Wurine's ancestors after his death, and he would be willing to share the power of Stormwind Kingdom with that person. In fact, Father had always been prepared for you to establish your own kingdom. But Uncle Duke Marcus did not give up and chose to be loyal to Stormwind. You did not change your mind in the face of despair and desperation. To be honest, the Rin family has nothing to repay you. Please join our royal family. If the bloodline of the Rin family is cut off, please lead the people of Stormwind. Duque considered William's request for a long time and finally chose to accept it. There were many things that could not be solved by forbearance. With the power but without the corresponding status, things would often go wrong. There was only one condition for Duque to agree to join the Stormwind royal family. Before the bloodline of the Rin family was cut off, the Marcus family would only be a Grand Duke. This represented respect for Lang, who had raised Duque. The alliance and the horde temporarily returned to peace and quiet. Unfortunately, even such a situation became very short-lived. On the 18th of February, a new piece of news shocked the entire horde. According to the report of the alliance's commander, Duque, a large number of remnants of the Blackrock clan were found in the Blackrock Tower between the Burning Steps and the Scorching Canyon. The troll chief Wuxia, who was still a guest in Stormwind City, sent out a messenger under Duque's suggestion. He made a request that all members of the horde thought was normal. He hoped that the scattered Blackrock clan would return to the horde. Regarding this matter, Wuxia even negotiated the conditions with the alliance represented by Duque. The horde used minerals in exchange for the alliance's green light to let the remnants of the Blackrock clan pass through the alliance's territory and send them to the Kalimdor continent. Because in Wuxia's view, the Blackrock clan, who lacked resources and food, could not survive in the resource-poor Blackrock Tower. The situation was as Duque expected, but it was far beyond Wuxia's imagination. The messenger came back in the form of a corpse. The head of the messenger sent by the horde was cut off, the brain was dug out, and the brain was made into a wine vessel and sent back. Only a piece of animal skin written in orc language was nailed to the messenger's head with a fine black iron dagger. I, Rend Blackhand, am the true chief of the horde. Starting with the despicable and cunning Orgrim, you self-proclaimed great chieftains have stolen the power that belonged to my father's Black Hand. Now the time for retribution has come. In the name of the world's strongest Black Dragon King, Rend Blackhand, the only mortal ruler under Nefarian, I declare that the horde has 3 months to launch an attack on the alliance. And I admit that I am the only chief of the horde. Seeing this, whether it was Wuxia, Kane, or Grom, none of the tribal chiefs could stand it any longer. They stared at the messenger. Until the last moment of his life, there was no fear on the messenger's face, only endless anger. Grom broke the dagger that was forged from black iron with one hand, letting the dark red blood flow down his palm. Rend Blackhand, I, Grom Hellscream, swear that I will make you pay with your life. I will make your body into a specimen and nail it to the gate of Orgrim forever, so that every horde citizen will spit on your filthy soul. The leaders of the horde rushed back to Orgrim as if their butts were on fire. Looking at the angry faces of the chiefs, the leaders of the alliance could only sigh in admiration. Duque silently took away the model of the Blackrock Tower from the military map. Although it's a bit unkind, I think we can temporarily ignore the Blackrock Tower and Nefarian's Blackwing's Nest. Now let's talk about Molten Core. Chapter 1131. In the conference hall, as Duque's maid and assistant, Solarian began to distribute the reports to the alliance's bigwigs. Almost every bigwig frowned when they saw the reports. Duque explained, the attacks have become more frequent since last autumn. If it was just the orcs, the Marcus family's private army and Dan Maluo's border guards would be able to teach them a lesson. But please note the proportion of fire elemental creatures. Dwarves were mostly impatient. Magni was already knocking on the table. Duque, come to a conclusion. Duque smiled bitterly. I estimate that the Flame Demon King Ragnaros will launch an all-out attack on Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle in July at the latest, in the middle of summer. Turalian frowned. Ordinary soldiers can't fight fire elemental creatures at all. No, it should be said that even we can't fight against those large elemental creatures. I remember that the Flame Demon King has a Baron Geddon under him. That's really... Magni interrupted, don't look at us. Even dwarves with a full set of protective gear can't swim in the lava river. No, there's a kind of protective gear that can do it. Duque suddenly clapped his hands, and the door of the Stormguard General's conference hall suddenly opened. At the gate there were 3 dwarves who looked a little uneasy standing there. Tension. It's the Dark Iron Dwarves? Dark skin? Magni blew his beard and stared. After all this trouble, the solution was in the hands of his mortal enemy. Magni, as the dwarf king who always boasted that he was the strongest craftsman in history, couldn't do it, and had to rely on his mortal enemy's help. This was a bit funny. Big brother. Why do I feel like you're a bit of a failure as the strongest craftsman? Bu Lang whispered to his big brother in a low voice of about 100 decibels. Pfft. Kalia couldn't help but burst out laughing. With the first one taking the lead, the rest of the queens and female generals all laughed wildly. Even the more experienced soldiers like Mograine had a hard time holding it in. Being shot in the back by his own brother, Magni had no regrets this time. Magni punched his brother directly. Alright, dwarves were just that direct in expressing their feelings. Duque ignored the emotional exchange between the bronze-bearded dwarven king brothers and began to introduce the 3 dark iron dwarves. They belonged to a neutral dark iron dwarf organization, the Thorium Brotherhood. With Duque's explanation, everyone finally understood. The Thorium Brotherhood was formed by a group of extremely talented black iron dwarven craftsmen and blacksmiths. They were one of the most outstanding miracles of Azeroth. They had the knowledge to create the equipment and weapons of the Flame Lord, Ragnaros, but they lacked the manpower to obtain the necessary materials. Now that Duque had contacted them, they agreed to sell the legendary Dark Iron Dwarves equipment recipes. After the 3 Dark Iron Dwarven craftsmen left, Turalian raised his doubts. Is their formula reliable? Duque replied, Ragnaros' lair, the Molten Core, is a fiery hell. Mortal armies are pointless there. If we want to eliminate this scourge, we can only send a group of heroic powerhouses to fight him. In that place where even the frost element is extremely thin, even Breaking Dawn wizards can't hold out for long. We have no other choice. But I believe that His Majesty Magni's knowledge will help us verify these equipment recipes. Magni, with a panda eye, puffed out his chest and sucked in his stomach. In the end, everyone laughed again. Duque turned and pointed to a place on the military map. Ronan, go to Azhara. This is, on a small island in Azhara near the Endless Sea, look for a water elemental creature called Duke Hydraxis. He can represent the Hydraxian water elemental army. Legend has it that these water elemental creatures are the mortal enemies of Ragnaros and his army. Ronan nodded, understood. The one who understood the enemy the most was the enemy, and the enemy of the enemy was one's friend. This was an unchanging truth. It was definitely beneficial for the Alliance to go there. After that, Duque put Boulang and Reginald in charge of dealing with the Blackrock orcs that came out of Blackrock Mountain. He turned to Turalian. Turalian, I want you to lead a 10-man heroic party into the Molten Core. It's to scout the way and also to prepare materials for fire-resistant equipment such as Magma Core and Blazing Core for the frontal attack. Won't it alert Ragnaros? It's unlikely according to the Thorium Brotherhood. As long as you don't attack the Lord-tier monsters. The unintelligent Molten Giants and Molten Hounds are like weeds in the ground. There's no way to kill them and no Lord-tier monster will care. Turalian immediately understood his mission. Then I'll collect materials near the entrance. At this time Mograine asked, Onyxia, what happened to her? Duque's expression was a little interesting. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. This should be considered a seal. I have complete control over her now. But the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza wants me to subdue her. Since Nesario's death, the position of the Earth Guardian has been lost. This has caused the effectiveness of planet Azeroth's magic formation to weaken, indirectly holding back the power of the Dragon Slumber Shrine. Duque decisively pushed the blame. Although this was the truth and the policy of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, it would take at least 5 years for another dragon to succeed as the Dragon Slumber Shrine's guardian. So, it's not easy for the Dragon Slumber Shrine either. The more they learned about the supernatural forces above the mortals, the more the Alliance felt that they had a great responsibility. After the military meeting, when Duque's lovers were ready to travel to the Molten Core, Duque finally made time to return to Karazhan. How's Onyxia? Duque asked Khadgar. The ghost mage shrugged. According to your status, you won't let her out until you're dead or alive. These days, she scolded you 256 times, and then begged you 1024 times. Duque blinked. What was this? But no matter how many doubts he had, it was nothing compared to seeing it with his own eyes. Going to the astrology hall, Duque found that his magic shield and seal was still quite intact, except for the dozen or so void worms outside the shield, which were rather disgusting. Asterisk swoosh swoosh swoosh. Asterisk a series of magic missiles took care of the void worms, which were probably at the level of a Morningstar wizard. Duque entered the magic formation. Unexpectedly, as soon as he closed the door, Duque heard a rustling sound. As soon as he turned around, Onyxia was already close to him. For a moment, Duque thought she was going to stab him or something. What greeted him was only a pair of fair arms that were as white as lotus roots. She was trembling. Chapter 1132. What's going on? If someone told Duque that the princess of the Black Dragon, Onyxia, was actually a timid person, Duque would be the first to not believe it. A timid person wouldn't go deep into the enemy's territory to play dirty tricks. Her father, Nisario, had snuck into the alliance and died, but she was still doing well in Stormwind City. Onyxia was definitely a ruthless character who took the unconventional path. But at this moment, what Duque saw was a tear-stained face, and her eyes were wandering. Her gaze flickered as soon as it came into contact with Duque, and when Duque didn't respond, she had no choice but to look at him again. The plump and soft dragon's peak had already turned into a round pancake under the pressure, and was stuck to Duque's chest without any gap. Duque could even clearly feel the pulse of the dragon's heart. That was the sound of a panicked and disorderly heartbeat. What's wrong? My little mount. Duque had a thought-provoking expression on his face as he teased in a frivolous voice. Mount? This humiliating term had obviously triggered Onyxia's nerves. For a moment, Duque thought that she was going to transform into her dragon form and bite him. Duque was even prepared to activate her soul reins to give her an unforgettable memory. But she clenched her fists tightly, her entire body tensed up, and even a small portion of her pearly white teeth was exposed. Then, like a deflated balloon, her entire body softened, and the tears in her eyes suddenly flowed out. You know it. You did it on purpose. 20% hatred, 20% anger, 30% pleading, and 30% emotion that even the princess of the Black Dragon herself didn't know. When she said this, her arms that were wrapped around Duque were trembling, and her eyes that were staring at Duque were full of pleading. If Onyxia's surrender a few days ago felt like she was being forced to submit to him, the current Onyxia gave Duque the feeling that she was 70 to 80% willing to submit to him. Why was it like this? Suddenly, the spatial crack connected to the astrology hall moved. After a series of wave-like tremors in midair, a few void worms crawled out and began to gnaw at the protective barrier in vain. The magic array that Duque had personally set up couldn't possibly be destroyed by a magical beast of this level. What happened next made even Duque feel a little annoyed. These worms, which looked to be the size of a calf, used their ring-shaped mouthparts full of sharp, thumb-sized teeth to gnaw at the magic shield. At times, there was a grinding sound, and at other times, it sounded like nails scratching against glass. These voices sounded quite vexing. Onyxia cried and begged, "You're threatening me? If I don't listen to you and dare to play tricks behind your back, you'll throw me to those disgusting lowly creatures, right? You won't even let me die. Every time you let them gnaw on my body, you use your holy light to heal my injuries, right? Don't lie to me, I know. Congratulations, my master, your plan has succeeded. I'm no match for you, I'll be obedient, don't let me stay here anymore." In his heart, Duque was dumbfounded. In all honesty, Duque had never thought of doing this. After regaining his rationality, Duque thought about how to find a safe place to lock up the princess of the Black Dragon without letting her escape. At that time, if he still didn't reply, Jaina and the others would go crazy. Only a ghost would have the thought to set up such a clever psychological torture trap. In the process of training Onyxia, this could be considered an unintentional surprise. It was much better than the result he had intended. Dragons had extremely tough bodies and strong vitality, and it was very difficult to hurt or even kill a dragon. On the other hand, the overly tough bodies of dragons made regeneration very troublesome. Duque glanced at the system notification and found that after so many days, Onyxia's vitality had barely recovered to 2%. It was not wrong to say that she was still in a dying state. Any creature's willpower would easily decline when they were seriously injured, and dragons were no exception. Just like how he had locked her up in the Celestial Hall, which was equivalent to a prison, and had let the void worm torture her mind. This was Duque's unintentional action. He did not expect this to be a fatal blow to Onyxia. If he had used all kinds of torture on her from the start or kept increasing the intensity of the torture after the first time he tamed a dragon, the result would most likely be that the greater the pressure, the more intense the resistance in her heart, and in the end she would fiercely rebel. Of course, there was another result, which was that Duque had completely broken her mind. In any case, there would not be this docile and obedient Onyxia. Duque could not help but think, next should I use both carrot and stick and not just be good or bad to her? What about training an evil dragon? Duque was also clueless. Apart from telling himself to think of a way to be immune to those 7 damned sins, in the end, he still had to clean up his own mess. Since he could not kill Onyxia, he could only walk this path of slightly evil training all the way to the dark. The actor Duque's expression was non-committal, and there was even a hint of evil charm. So smart. So, will you really be obedient and not rebel anymore? Onyxia was about to answer, but Duque's index finger pressed against her red lips. I don't want to hear those meaningless lies. Your disguises and lies cannot fool me. If your answer does not satisfy me, I will change to a more interesting place for you. I will bring you to a more interesting place. Duke's tone was light, as if he was chatting with her about his daily life. The more it was like this, the more frightened this female black dragon, who was very good at playing tricks, became. She, trembling, raised her head with great effort and looked into Duque's eyes. I won't rebel anymore. When she said this, her voice was still very loud, but she immediately lowered it and added, probably won't rebel? Duque's smile became even more charming. Onyxia hurriedly raised her right hand, and her index finger and thumb seemed to be holding an air bean. Probably, the probability is so small. Really? I'm already telling the truth, don't punish me anymore. The Black Dragon Princess's tears flowed down like a waterfall, and she no longer dared to look at Duque. Like a little kitten seeking warmth, she curled up in Duque's arms, her body trembling. Well said. Looks like I'll have to give you a reward. Duque suddenly carried Onyxia in a princess carry. When the princess came back to her senses, she was already in a warm room. There was a blazing fireplace and a soft and clean fluffy blanket. Duque's voice sounded again. A mount should look like a mount. Onyxia nodded meekly. Chapter 1133. After the dragon-taming whip visited the dragon's cave again and figured out the depth and twists of the dragon's cave, Duque finally had a detailed and in-depth understanding of his exclusive mount. After riding Onyxia once at night, Duque cast holy light and fed her a large amount of good meat, bringing her HP back to 10% in one night. The next morning, Duque decided to ride her again. Pippy dragon, let's go. Duque sat on the huge black dragon's neck and swung the soul reins. Onyxia instantly turned her head and rolled her eyes at Duque. However, those yellow vertical pupils that were bigger than water basins no longer had that fierce and vivid light. In the end, she sighed helplessly and flapped her huge wings. The Black Dragon Princess injuries were still very serious, and there were many holes in her wings. She almost lost her balance when she took off. Unlike in human form, at least the wounds on the surface had all healed. The Black Dragon Princess in dragon form still had many wounds that were shocking to look at. This was done on purpose by Duque. Anyway, no matter how long Onyxia had been in human form, she still believed that she was a dragon. The wounds on her dragon body allowed her to recognize her situation even more clearly. Thus, she was unconsciously willing to make more concessions in human form for the sake of survival. But wasn't concessions in human form still concessions? Perhaps she could still deceive herself on the surface, but what about in her bones? With one hand holding the reins and feeling the breeze brushing past his face, Duque felt great. I'm not riding some nameless, common young dragon of the dragon clan. Either I don't ride or I just walk, I don't ride a mount. If I'm going to ride, I'm going to ride the best. Only a boss dragon like Onyxia is the mount that I dream of riding. After circling a few times in the sky above Karazhan, it felt good but a little slow. Duque took out a long whip used by beast tamers from his storage pouch, and with a snap, he lashed out with the whip, hitting the black dragon's butt. As a boss-level black dragon, Onyxia definitely had thick skin and tough scales. The dragon's body did not feel anything from the whip, but the psychological shock was the most profound. Her whole body stiffened and she almost fell from the sky. For a moment, she almost wanted to fall to her death together with her bastard master, Duque. Unfortunately, wizards were the least likely professions to fall to their deaths, let alone Breaking Dawn wizards. If the dignified Black Dragon Princess were to fall to her death, she would be too ashamed to face her ancestors. Although she did not have the face to see her dead father now, she could only imagine the day she would be rescued when she thought about how Alexstrasza was captured and almost turned into a mount. Now that she was under the control of the Black Dragon soul, and had handed over the soul reins, she could only imagine the day she would be rescued. Well, she actually didn't have much hope. After all, her brother Nefarian had never taken her seriously. The relationship between the Black Dragons had always been cold and indifferent. After being whipped a few times by Duque, no matter how unwilling Onyxia was, she could only endure her grief and anger and try her best to speed up. Riding a dragon and riding a griffin were essentially the same. Dragons were bigger and smarter. They could sit more stably and they could do whatever they wanted with a sole command. This was really incomparable. Duque had originally wanted to slay dragons, but he had accidentally become a dragon knight. This could only be said to be fate. After flying around the upwind trail for about 10 rounds, Duque called out to Onyxia, "That's enough, let's do this for today." The black dragon's huge wings flapped gracefully in the air, and its huge body slowly descended onto the platform of Karazhan. The Saintess of Chastity, Khadgar, and a large group of Einherjars looked at Duque and Onyxia with complicated gazes. After lowering her neck to let Duque jump off, the Black Dragon Princess used the ultimate transformation spell and returned to her human form. She was still rather weak. After returning to her human form, her legs gave way and she staggered. Duque quickly caught her. "Are you all right?" Facing Duque's gentle greeting, Onyxia's body trembled. She shouted in her heart, "Don't be fooled, Onyxia. You are the great and proud Black Dragon Queen. I can't let these small favors move you." However, in her state of not recovering from her injuries, her body and mind were very honest. She could almost immediately feel that her weak body seemed to have some warmth, as if she had some strength again. Onyxia's face blushed slightly as she lowered her head and replied, "I'm fine. Rest for a while. Come to my room at 2 in the afternoon. I have something for you to do." Understood. After eating the large amount of lunch that Khadgar had brought, she lay on the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. She felt that if it was her previous self, she would probably be venting the anger in her heart and destroying everything around her. Unexpectedly, she did not have such thoughts at all. Was it because her injuries were too heavy that she no longer had such thoughts? Was it because her heart was tired? Or was her body and mind already beginning to fall? Her mind was in a mess, and she did not dare to continue imagining. Unknowingly, the time had come. What kind of punishment and torture was waiting for her? When she arrived at Duque's room, Onyxia saw that the sky and floor were covered with clothing blueprints, as well as half-made clothes and a large amount of fabric. "Please help me be a model today." Because a certain transmigrator was determined to take all the gold coins from the purses of the noblewomen. Therefore, this world also had 2 programs, Storm Fashion Week, and the Queen's Secret Underwear Show. It was precisely because the models always wore beautiful new clothes that attracted the attention of the noblewomen, coupled with the policy that there was never a second set of the same style, that the noblewomen would spend a lot of money in one go. Of course, everyone knew that the inventor of the new style of women's clothing was also fucking Duque. Even when Duque was missing, the Marcus family still relied on the blueprints that Duque left behind to make a lot of money. She didn't expect that Duque would ask her to be his model today. "Catwalk. Raise your hand. Put your left hand on your waist. Turn around twice and see." Duque was like the most professional tailor and designer, ordering Onyxia around. After a busy afternoon, she didn't feel anything, but after dinner that night, when Duque presented her with some new clothes that were as beautiful as the heavens, Onyxia suddenly felt a sense of enchantment. It seems that, following Duque was not bad. The reward for being a model was new clothes. This was indeed intentional by Duque, and it unexpectedly had a miraculous effect. In theory, it could slowly remove the guard in Onyxia's heart, but the speed was absolutely beyond Duque's expectation. That night, when Duque went to Onyxia's room, he found that she was trying on new clothes. When taming the dragon again, Duque could clearly feel Onyxia's passion and cooperation. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.